Recording is on.
Well, it's Sunday, December the 12th, and welcome to the Eastern Extinctionati meeting, everybody. Nice to see such a big crowd. I didn't think so many people would be on. I thought it was getting more Christmassy, and I thought everybody was doing their Christmas stuff, but nice to see everybody. Anything on the agenda that anybody wanted to put up? I made a rough agenda with a question that Gary had about discernment or discrimination. Does anybody have any topics they want to discuss first? Any news from the week or anything? Okay, Lynn, should we start?
The failure.
Gary, do you want to formulate a question?
Yeah, look, what do you want to start with, discrimination, or do you want to get my little bits of junk out of the way first, because they might not amount to much? I had one question was, do you think that it's about time that we rename this group, given its new mission, which is about to unfold, you know, when you reveal the manifesto? And I just put there, you know, should we rename ourselves the Flipped Earth Society, which, you know, makes our mission obvious.
No, I thought the Extinctionati was great.
Yeah, Extinctionati is not taken by any other group.
Yeah. But anyway, I didn't think we were changing direction. I always wanted to tell people about the flipping. It's just impossible to tell people about it because it's just too incredible and they've never heard about it. So and so I thought, well, you have to introduce it a little bit and, you know, just start with something like, you know, with a cult or something. It's easy to fold it into the beliefs of a cult. But, you know, it's one of those strange things where people just are busy playing in front of the steamroller and they've completely got their eye on the wrong ball. So whenever anybody talks about the Greenland ice sheet melt and stuff, they talk about, you know, sea level rise in 2100 and stuff. And it's like, I want to vomit every time I hear that. It's like they're way more, you know, that's the least of our worries. There's way more serious stuff before then. But yeah, I think it's the first chink in, if you can get through to anybody to take it seriously, it's making the whole worldview unravel, because we're all in this kind of belief that the world is really robust and things never change and everything's rather secure, and they forget that we, you know, just absolutely razor's edge all the time on this ball spinning around the sun, and the sun, you know, has these flares and there's this gamma, you know, activity from these gamma ray bursts, and when they hit us, we'd be fried, and the comets streaming around, and the climate system is chaotic, and everybody treats it like it's smooth, and you can dial it up and down like it's, you know, the thermostat in your office. It's like everybody's just completely an upside down world. And so it's the very first, you know, both psychologically and literally, where people start to turn their world upside down. And in any way, you know, that's what it's all about. The kind of rebirth is psychological or physical. Just change our socioeconomic way of life. It's walking through a mirror. It is just inverting. It's, you know, flipping left or right, or inverting the world. I mean, I say all these things. I don't think anybody really takes me literally or seriously, but you will one day. You'll suddenly go, "My fuck, he was actually saying that. Why didn't we listen?" Because you think it's all like kind of fantasy or game or something like that, and they say like, no, it's presented as a game because it's too much for people to take in one thing. So it's the whole project, the ARG and everything, is just a way of sugarcoating what's really going to happen. But you know, it puts you somewhere around flat earthers to tell people. So it's like the worst of the conspiracy theory, and it's the worst of deep doom. And, you know, it's like, so how do you tell people?
Yeah.
It's like, well, I think we're running out of time. So you just got to come and say it. You just got to beat people over the head with it. Say, don't worry about fucking sticking gluing your tits to the road. And so it's too late. It's too late, guys. You know, get ready. The shit is about to hit the fan.
I was thinking about because you put
literally about to flip. I mean,
you put up the movie, or somebody did, about David Icke, and I think there were some other things discussed during the week. And you know, when you look at it, I don't think he lost any followers by making an outrageous claim in order to smuggle in some fairly interesting thoughts. You know,
no,
a
he
lot
got them
of
back.
people
I
claim.
mean, he did. He went down to single digits, right? He went down to single digits, and then he got them all back. Eventually, he was filling Wembley Stadium with crowds and tens of thousands, and that, you know, but he got them all back when everybody started to realize maybe this guy's not so nutty. But then, what you're really telling everybody is that they're nuts. You're telling people they're nuts, and it's way easier for them to say, "What is the chance that, you know, 7.6 billion people are nuts? Surely you're the nut." You say, like, you know, sanity is not something you can put to the vote. Just because 7.8 billion people are in this massive delusion doesn't mean that they're sane. But that's, you know, the world demands that that's the way you interpret it, because it's pejorative to say people are insane, but they're demonstrably insane. I mean, we're heading for collapse of civilization, and they're burning fossil fuel like there's no tomorrow. I mean, come on, by what measure are people not insane? The world is barking fucking mad. But, you know, as an individual, you can't tell people that. It's like, who are you to tell the world they're mad? Well, sorry, one of us is mad, and I'm not destroying myself. They are.
It's interesting that even even Eckhart Tolle said that. You know, in his own little way, made the same comment.
There's so many strands to this. Because once you start down this path, then, you know, it's just reflected back to you again and again and again. It's like Tolle's New Earth, and this general idea that there's a rebirth coming. You know, even Ray Kurzweil's Singularity in 2045. There's this idea of this pregnancy, you know, this expectation of this kind of grand rebirth. Even the Christians have the rapture. But you know, nobody examines it, and nobody looks at it with a fine tooth comb. They're just a whole lot of evangelists. It's like the futurists and stuff. They have this mad hand-waving bullshit about Mars and AI, and nobody stops and questions, you know, in detail. Okay, let's go through your little story. No one does it. I mean, we do it a bit here, but like, who challenges Pinker and in any serious depth? You know, I mean, who challenges Elon Musk and says, very few people say, like, you do know you're fucking barking mad. No one is going to fucking Mars. No one's going to live on Mars. Are you fucking nuts? It's like talking about, we're going to move to live inside the inside of a, you know, nuclear reactor. It's like, oh, you're nuts. Well, Elon Musk just said that, and he's a genius, according to the world. So it's like, we're fucking nuts. All of us are fucking mad.
The same.
But nobody will allow each other our madness.
It's the same era of that's been made all the way along with religions and all of this stuff is that I think they're looking for, they're expecting this to be an external thing. Nobody stops to think that this rebirth is something for them. It's always something it's an outside agency. It's not their shift. You get to remain the same and enjoy the fireworks show, and everything else changes, and then it's all I don't know whether it's all right again or whatever the new order becomes. But nobody stopped to think, oh, hey, hang on, this transformation is not out there; it's in here. So we're always looking. Oh, well, it is.
It's both. You see.
Yeah, I know now it is. Yeah.
I mean, that's what all the activists. This is the problem the activists are making. Is, I mean, you can't come to. It takes decades to figure all this stuff out. I mean, well, it took me decades. Maybe you were smarter, and you can do it quicker. But the activists are all doing that. They're all doing like, we're the good guys. We're going to take over from the bad guys and then change the world, and like complete change to the world. It's like, really? And you're not going to change at all. The workers are still going to be workers, and the middle class are still going to be consumers. And it's like, we're all still going to have democracy, even though none of that has worked. It's like, it's like, you really, no one's going to change, but the world is going to change. All the futurologists. Oh, we're going to be flying cars and have AI, and the world is going to be changed, but we're going to be the same old shitheads. It's like, how could it possibly be if we actually got Ray Kurzweil's rapture of the nerds? It's like, you mean the nerds aren't going to change? They're just going to waltz in like, oh, gates open, and it's like, Black Friday sale, and all the shitheads walk in with all the shit that's in their head. It's like, seriously, how do you get to this utopia with all these fuckheads from a slave plantation? It's like, obviously, if you fill utopia full of slaves, you've just relocated the slave plantation.
Hugh, can I jump in there? Because I've just,
anyway.
That's a good point. Because I've just actually finished listening to last week's meeting just now. And, where you're talking about, well, you mentioned a couple of times how, even if the psychopaths hanging out in their spaceships were the only ones to survive, and if they came back down to Earth and all the rest of it. Well, anyway, regardless of who survives, if you posit a situation where some small number of human beings survive, now, they're not going to be able to re-establish industrial technological civilization. They may be able to do what they can do with the residual junk that's left, probably. And you've also mentioned before about like the tragedy of the loss of conscious awareness, which could take, forever to re-evolve, or maybe it wouldn't ever do it. But I suppose the question is, you've got some imaginary small group of human beings who've survived. Are they going to? Do you have confidence that they're going to not just go down the same pathway again in terms of the massive psychological error that's been made at the moment? That the alien cortex is just not going to reassert.
Well,
yeah, absolutely.
If the climate regime doesn't allow agriculture...
No, here, let me...
Okay.
Yeah. Oh, go on. Yeah, I was going down the same path as you.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
If the climate regime doesn't allow agriculture for some generations, people might, be settled in the hunting and gathering again. They won't do it. They might forget, the civilized consciousness. Possibly.
More serious than that. You can't. No, more serious than that. You can't recreate industrial civilization because it's a one-off that was done on fossil fuels. We've used half of the fossil fuels, and if you pull the rug out of industrial society, they can't get to the other half. In other words, we're at the point where to mine the oil that we're doing now, you need all the technology that we have. So it's kind of like they won't be able to get back because, you know, for want of a nail, you know, the horse was unshod, and for want of the horse, the message was not sent, and for want of the message, the battle was lost. And so you can't get there from here. This is a problem that I don't think people really understand about technology in general, especially historians of technology, which is funny. But it works like this. Imagine how can I explain this simply? So you often hear historians of tech say stuff which is completely batshit crazy, like kind of history style, popular reviews of history, and particularly on the History Channel, I think they're very guilty of this one, where they do these counterfactuals and they talk about like Heron of Alexander, right? Heron of Alexander made a steam engine. It made a steam turbine in like, I don't know, 30 BC or something, maybe even more, 300 BC. Anyway, so somewhere very before COVID. And so then they say, you know, what a dipshit he was. You know, he could have just put that on a wagon, and, you know, the Industrial Revolution would have started 2,000 years ago. It's like, no, you morons, of course not. The way to see it is to think of Heron going to some investors, which is quite feasible. This is what he would literally have to do if he wanted to start the Industrial Revolution. He would go to some investors and say, look, I have this steam turbine, and you just put some coal underneath and, you know, heat up some water. Steam comes out of these nozzles. Woo, look at this thing go. So like, you look at the speed of this thing. You know, we could fly airplanes. We could have like, you know, we could have carriages driven without horses and stuff like that. And the investors would be laughing. They would laugh. Do you know why? It's just not economically feasible. They would ask, the first question they'd ask, say, Heron, arsehole, is like, what's made out of? You'd say metal. You'd say, like, the guy who mines metal would say, like, oh, you're fucking kidding me. Metal? You made this out of metal. Why don't you just make it out of gold, idiot? So he's saying, no, well, metal is just right for doing this. And you say, where are you going to get the metal from? Well, from a mine like you. So he's like, how much metal do you need? Well, we need about 1 kilogram. 1 kilogram of metal? That's 5 years' work for my entire operation, you moron. So, like, I would need 10,000 slaves working for 10 years to get your fucking kilogram of metal. And it would be like, and then you say, okay, so here, my metal is in like Spain. So that's where we mine our metal. So how are you going to get this kilogram of metal from Spain to like Greece or Alexandria? And it would be like, we'll use ships. Okay, but now there's like this voyage, you've already cost about as much as like 5 slaves. So why don't I just, you get the 5 slaves, pull it around, then I've saved that money. Is it like, okay, but anyway, is that all it needs? Metal? No, it needs coal. Coal? You mean you fucking get coal? You need a continuous supply of coal. Why don't you just put an ox there and feed it straw? It would be way cheaper. You know, so like you carry on, you know, try and make this business. And I can't believe that historians of tech are this fucking stupid. It just means they've never done a pitch to investors or something. But the investors would always tell you that, like, look, you know, you got 10,000 slaves, they're always going to do better. The capital costs were always defeated. I actually did this almost exactly once with, okay, so I'll tell you a bit of my history. I did this glass thing, which you know about, but there was also, the component was to, you know, save on paint and stuff like that by doing mosaics. So the idea was you get mosaics, pixelate them according to a graphic, and you can, like, huge area you could cover with very detailed graphics, make the glass mosaics, each a pixel, right? So then it was, you know, basically laid with robotic machines. So that was the thing. So then now there are people that do actually lay mosaics, and you can get a picture, a photograph, and, you know, an image, just send it to them. They will have them laid. And so the guy that does this, the biggest guy in the States, when he heard that I was going to do this, then he rang me up and he tried to convince me not to do it because I was going to automate him out of a business. And his argument was simple. He said, how much is it going? One of these machines going to cost? I said, about 100K. He said, well, I'm gonna bury you, because for 100K, I can get laborers in China at this stage. They were much cheaper. He said 30 cents an hour, and basically, how much mosaics can you lay? So then, basically, it would have taken me about 5 years to catch up with him laying them with slave labor in China. And so, I said, basically, I can make the business case, but you got to sink 100K into this machine as a capital cost and recoup it over about 5 years. If you're paying slaves in China, you can start on day one and you're churning out product. You don't even have to develop and build the machine. So a lot of people have said slavery holds the world back, but it's a dumb argument, because it's and stop the industrial. But it's a dumb argument because we still got slavery today. Everybody's still a wage slave. They've just moved up a little. They've exported all the industrial footprint to China, and then all the rest are white collar workers. So they're all doing bullshit jobs and generally paper shuffling. But they're kind of supported on the back of the 3 child laborers in the third world. But the rest is all just a paper chase. And so, but the basic thing is to get back to that.
I was just going to say, to go back to what Gary was saying, what happens to the alien cortex in the groups of survivors? Because even if they don't have the resources, even if they can't do agriculture, even if they can't mine, even if they can't do technology, there's still this left intellectual kind of thing that we've been talking about for so long. And why would that disappear with the flipping?
See, and just to add to what Sophie said, I think that there might be. I mean, I think what Ryan said about the large scale agriculture won't re-establish, and that the things that kind of pushed along the development of the Alien Cortex project. But I was sort of concerned about this sort of interim period where these people have got a planet full of not resources that they can mine, but they've got a planet of leftover stuff. And, all sorts of bits and pieces could still be got working again to some extent. I mean, gradually over time, of course, they would lose functionality down to zero, but, there will be a period of time, I think. And given that people don't know anything else except the technological society, they would tend to want to try and return to something familiar. So there's that.
No, almost without question, that's not going to happen.
I'm just saying.
Yeah, it's almost. So the reason is that nobody has any use for that. You see, that's very hard for us to understand, because the reason why the business plan works for Heron, if Heron could easily make the business plan for his steam turbine today, the reason is because of all the network underneath. Basically, the economic system is a dense, self-supporting mesh network. It's kind of like they say that in the opening of Threads, that everything is mutually self-supporting. So it's this vast network of, think of it like an ecosystem, so that you can, if say engine breaks down, you can always send out for parts or something like that. So those parts can be manufactured because they can send out for lathes and for machines and for machining tools that make the part, and on and on and on, in this massive, fragile, super fragile mesh network. Now, this is what people don't understand. Often you meet people on Reddit that say stuff like, well, we should be prepping and leave lots of like solar panels and stuff because people will need them afterwards. Say, for what? Yeah. No, they won't need fucking solar panels. And the same with all the other things. What's wrong with the Mad Max future is you see guys flying in cars and in helicopters and stuff made out of rusty material. Say, why? I'm telling you, when you have to look for food, you do not fucking wait building fucking helicopters and cars. It's just like, you don't have time for that shit, because you're a hunter-gatherer. Hunter-gatherers don't have time for that shit. What does a hunter-gatherer use a solar panel for? It's the most useless thing known to man. You can't eat them.
Hang on. I think hunter-gatherers have a lot more time than industrials do, but not in the collapse. There isn't food.
Only in an intact environment. Yeah, only in an intact environment where they know what they're doing. When you start, if you have a look at survivalists like Bear Grylls, right? All of his day is a struggle. The guys only get to the original luxury society because they have a long tradition. They're leaning on the ancestors. They're old people to tell them where the water hole is and stuff like that. But if you have no old people to tell you where to dig in the dry riverbed to reach water, you got to fucking dig all day trying to find water. So they are leaning on the ancestors. They're leaning on a long chain and a large body of knowledge, which we have nothing of. Now, everybody thinks that, people in our civilization, we think we're going to lean on the large body of information we have. We're going to lean on the internet and what Einstein told us and what Newton told us and what Tesla invented and all of this kind of thing. It's like, no, we're not. All of that stuff is unsupportable because it needs this advanced ecosystem of mutual support.
Yeah, the other thing is here, related to what you're saying there, is that it's, the system we've got now is something that actually depends now on the unbroken lineage of its ancestry, of its development. Because if you want to make something, you have to have a machine to make it. You have to have a machine to make the other machine, and 10 machines to make.
I would argue the opposite.
So yeah, I know you meant, but I'm looking at it from.
It depends on the broken lineage.
Yeah. No, but I mean, we've got a lineage of machines that have developed over the Industrial Revolution. And once they stop functioning, you can't just, it's like what you're saying about the solar panels, that, supposing there's some people left on the planet and they can still read and they go to a library and they find all these books, how to make a solar panel. But they'll soon realize that the problem is not how to make a solar panel, it's how to make about 1,000 different machines that make 1,000 other machines that make even more machines, which finally enable you to make a solar panel, even if you can get the resources together and the energy as well. So we're on this thing where we once you break that chain, a lot of it goes back to your glass furnace. That once a lot of these machines and a lot of these industries, once you stop them, this is not a light switch. You just turn it back on again when you're ready. Once you stop a lot of these things, you just can't go back to them and switch them on and expect to do anything anymore. And they have only got to stop once, and that will stop you from re-establishing that series of machines that lead to the thing you're trying to produce.
So it's happening right now.
It's sort of, in a way, related to what you're saying about the hunter-gatherers, that, to be a hunter-gatherer starting from scratch in an impoverished environment where you've got none of your ancestral wisdom built up over vast times to fall back on is a very hard thing to do, although they can probably pull it off. But I think the comparable thing with technology probably couldn't be done. You're going to lose it.
So it's happening right now with the supply shock. So what you're seeing now is they stopped during lockdown. They just stopped the global supply chain. And I said right back in the beginning of this pandemic that you can't do that without having a lot of trouble when you start it up again. And that's exactly what's happened. And I explained why. It's supply shock. So the economists are taught the danger of supply shocks in a supply chain. So this is not only a supply chain, there's a supply web. But you see, relationships are still there. The network will be damaged, but it's still quite resilient. In other words, if I need for a motor, when things start up again, I can still phone up somebody in my regular supplier from a ago and say, oh, it's a tough pandemic, but anyway, can I put in an order? And he says to me, well, yeah, but I've got hundreds, I've got a massive backlog. I will get to you sometime around the end of 2022. And in the meantime, there are large problems with capital distribution and stuff. So you might phone up the guy and you can't get a hold of him because he went bust during the, the interim time because of capital constraints. You don't see that the logistics of shuffling all of this material around the world also is backed by an even huger shuffle of fiscal. It's basically, there's this huge financial system that is shuffling, trillions and trillions shuffle a day in financial instruments that are really representative of a very small number of goods that get shipped relatively, not there's something like 1 trillion a day circulating around just in Forex just to pay for all of the crap on the containers. But the containers themselves probably have 1/100th of that or 1/10 of that. So yeah, you can shock the whole system. It's just, imagine it like an ecosystem. You can take a lot of species out. Where these networks have the characteristics of a small world network, so they are kind of scale free. And so what those networks break down, particularly they change phase at about 50%. So you can take out 50% of the nodes and then you're gone. The whole thing is gone at 50%. So we probably took out about 10%, but we'll recover from the pandemic. Eventually, everybody will sort it out and there'll be a big shuffle and everybody will get back. What you can't do after this is, without oil, if you take oil or stuff out of the mix, the guys won't be able to they won't be able to mine deep enough. They won't have the tech to you can see the EROEI in oil is a representation of how difficult it is to get to. And, unless you're just like scooping it out of a lake, hunter-gatherers are not going to get to any cheap sources of energy. So they're going to have to spend their whole day. They're not going to be like hunter-gatherers and stuff, because the hunter-gatherers' sources of energy are fat on game and things like that. And the game is, using grassland and savanna. And so those are the energy sources. They're not kind of there anymore. So the guys are going to have to work their ass off to get energy all the fucking time. And it certainly won't be fossil fuel energy. And there's not much forestation left. So you've got to have a fire at night and stuff just to survive. And you've got to have skins and stuff. So, you're going to be working your fucking ass off getting those things if the global supply chain breaks down, which it certainly will. It's so damn fragile.
This is my issue.
Yeah,
this is my issue with John Michael Greer's retro future and stuff, is that he's saying we could go back to a sustainable level of technology at a century ago or a few decades ago, where 1930s technology or something. And but that's not feasible, because that you can't get parts for those things. You can't buy those things. The supply chain is extinct for that level of technology. We can't go back. Economically.
Yeah, it's like a fire, saying the fire can die back to the little burning embers we had before, and say no, it can't. Then we lost the fuel. It's not like, when the fire dies out, we'll die back to the fire we created 100 years ago. It's like, no, the fire's consumed everything.
See, isn't the other thing too that the existence of even the 1930s technology depended upon a system that was absolutely devoted to expanding and growing? Otherwise, it couldn't have. So you've got that additional thing as well, that even if you went back, it would still expand again.
Yeah, but what I wanted to ask you also, and add to the discussion what I said earlier, if you think about Robinson Crusoe, for example, the book we all read when we were kids, and your man is on his island and he's got, what does he do all day is try to recreate a sort of simile British life with a structure, with a Sunday off, and every day working his ass to make furniture and to try to get back to exactly what he had when he was living in England. And I mean, that's what I'm talking about. That part of the brain is going to emerge maybe completely intact, and you're going to have the same kind of behavior. I know. Look, he's working all day. Robinson is working all day.
Okay, yeah, so this is where I wanted to get to. I was trying to get off the tech track and get onto this, because this is the question I was trying to get onto is why does the alien cortex survive? It can't. It can't survive in any form. So what's Robinson Crusoe is Friday. See, the reason why Robinson Crusoe can get back to some semblance of, like, I remember the book when I was a kid, and they have this little panel, this little etching on the thing, and they have Robinson Crusoe like a Roman emperor eating grapes, and then the caption is, "How like a king we dined." But like, it's only him. Friday's serving him up shit. His man Friday is a slave. So that's what's wrong with it, because it's very subtle. But you see that the emperors need slaves, right? And you say, well, why did they only get slaves? And after the Younger Dryas, when civilization started. So you can only recreate the shit with slaves. That's fundamental to the thing. So why didn't we only get slaves there? It's because they had options. You see, what happened after the Younger Dryas, and particularly in the Fertile Crescent and stuff, is the guys didn't have any options. What made Egypt were slaves, and what made the slaves of Egypt is the desert. They couldn't escape. You can show this in there are lots of models for how you can have a fair hierarchy kind of thing. They model it on a computer, and then say the only way you can keep a hierarchy fair, and there's a very interesting paper I read about a decade ago about this, is they said they could only find one way, and and that's to make the nodes able to defect from the system. So in other words, if the slave can walk with their feet, then the hierarchy can be fair. But here's the thing. If they can walk with their feet, you'll never have a hierarchy. What stopped hierarchies coming about was everybody could fuck off. As soon as somebody was an arsehole, you just fucked off. What makes the business corporation today work in America and all over the world is that people have to suffer the arsehole. You put an arsehole in managing all these people, and they can't fuck off. They have to go in and spend 8 hours a day listening to this cunt, which they would better put an axe in his head and walk away in a hunter-gatherer society. So it allows people to be a bunch of shits. It allows psychopathy, in fact. So the alien cortex really gets into gear with civilization. Now, when civilization goes, the alien cortex has to go. First of all, there's a big filter. This is like, kind of like the Fermi filter or whatever it's called, the thing about why the Fermi paradox, why there aren't more civilizations. And one of the theories is there's a great filter, and we kind of screw it up like we are now. But it literally is like that. So go through what the alien cortex has to go through to make it through the flippening in this whole scenario. Straight away, you can see a large part of the psychopaths are eliminated. So take, for example, why people are saying, like, I've seen a few people say something to the lines of, we shouldn't let all the psychopaths and rich people and billionaires survive the flippening. And I say, like, you can. It's going to be difficult enough for anybody to. Their kids will be completely different to their parents. So even if Jeff Bezos made it through the flipping in outer space and came back again, he's not going to survive long. He's probably going to be killed off by his own kids. So just look at the preppers now. Look, they can't survive. Just look at the prepper mentality. They're individualists, acting like individuals, and they have this attitude of, like, I'm going to survive, fuck you and everybody else. And you say, if you have that attitude, which is the quintessential alien cortex, it's self-supporting, it's mutually self-supporting, and it's xenophobic, it's everything that will kill you off as a hunter-gatherer. So all the traits that civilization made, the psychopathy and this hierarchy and this idea of the king, the big chief, kicks off straight away in Samaria. It kicks off in Uruk. With what really makes Uruk is there's a king man that makes an army, and he's a mafioso. He goes and beats up people that don't have any options to escape him. And so the whole world now has no escape. Everybody's in that regime. But as the hunter-gatherers will, after the flipping, everybody will have an option. Everybody will, in a way, if they survive, the population density will be very thin. So nobody will be able to do Robinson Crusoe because no slaves will stick around to be abused. And anybody that tries to do that, you see, they get away with it now because they have an army. All the security forces and stuff we have now are to secure property rights. And securing property rights is necessary for you to be a psychopath and to exploit other people. So when, it's going to be very difficult to keep a security force and an army and pay them, because what you're going to pay them with? They always paid them with grain because it kind of worked. That grain's easy. Grain you can measure out. You can use it as a currency, and you can keep an army with it. And if you have grain, you automatically wipe out the ecosystem so that other people don't have options. But we saw this. I know this for a fact because you can go back to South Africa's history, which is everything I get comes from. So if you go back to South Africa, you have hierarchies because it was kind of a dangerous place. There you have pastoralists, right? The whites coming up from the Cape, and then Dingaan and Dingashweyo and these guys, Zulus and stuff coming down. They're both pastoralists. They're both cattle farmers. Now, cattle farmers are bound to compete because the cattle need to graze and move on. There's not enough pasturage. So they're going to fight over the pasture. And that's exactly what happened. Just so happened that, the guns won out, narrowly, by the way. And then, you see, what happened after that was then they discovered gold. Then they needed slaves. So the first thing you need to reconstruct civilization is slaves to go down the mines. No one wants to go down a mine to get your metal, Aaron. So then what they do is they try and get labor out of all these guys who are now being defeated. So if you're a cattle farmer, you have vast herd of cattle because you're a big chief and you can afford to be a big man. But if you're defeated and you can no longer have a big herd because the white man now claims your land and drives you off into subsistence, then in subsistence, you're quite happy. You can actually have a couple of cows, a few goats, as long as you don't fuck with a white man, you can live, in the sun very nicely in Africa. And that's what they all did. They went like, okay, that's the end of the big man game. Let's go and be subsistence farmers. Now, the whites had a problem because they said like, well, we need some assholes to go down the mine to make us rich. And these guys sit in the sun all day and give us the finger when we try and tell them, hey, I have some white man money. And they go like, what am I going to use it for? And so they got them off the land, mainly by taxes and getting them in the financial system. And that's how they got them down the mines. And then they were fucked. The population increased vastly after that. So that's the story. If you see if you want to be Jeff Bezos, okay, so you think of it, you go into space in your little space colony, you can't stay there for long. Like microgravity and stuff is eating away your bones. You just have a look at Biosphere 2. You can have a terrarium or something, a kind of a little thing that works, but you're already getting into shit because your solar panels are going out, and then you can't call the help desk because it's just ash down on Earth. So you got to come down pretty fucking soon, right? You can't stay up there for long. Look at the guys up on the space station. They fucked after being up there for those record amount of time. So by the time you land on Earth, you put your ragged on. Yeah.
But you made the comment a couple of times before that one of the safest places to be during the flippening is at sea. And I kind of started thinking, well, why are these fuckers spending so much money supposedly going into space to ride this period out? It would be cheaper for them to go for submarines or, I suppose they have already.
No, they are. They are.
Yeah, they are they?
No,
yeah.
no, they are.
Can I?
Yeah, they are.
Do you mind if I break the discussion there?
No, just one word. No, just quick one word there.
Yeah.
Have a look. Have a look at all these guys doing undersea cities and
Oh,
stuff like
okay.
that. There's
Right.
a large contingent. You see, this is why I say is you mustn't listen to me too much. You must figure out your own thing, because it's kind of like, okay, as the Extinctionati, we want somebody to survive. We want humanity to survive, even if it's just. That's cool, because he's Jeff Bezos is. I'm just saying. I hope I got the point across that he's not going to survive long, because he's thinking in terms of the alien cortex. The alien cortex was a product of civilization. It's a product actually of trade. And so these guys are not traders when they come back. So really our alien cortex, according to me, started about 50,000 years ago. And it started because people started trading. What your alien cortex is a chess player. It's fundamentally for the marketplace, and it's fundamentally for you to cheat a customer. So it's basically you have a zero-sum game in the marketplace. You have the shopkeeper and you have the customer, and a fixed amount of money, that's the money in the customer's pockets, and a fixed amount of goods, that's what's on the stall for the shop owner. They're going to trade, but it's a zero-sum game. Peter's loss is Paul's gain, and vice versa. So out of that mentality, 50 of that kind of horse trading is where our alien cortex comes from. I don't see if any of these guys set up a market stall, that's adversarial. I don't think they're going to make it. If Jeff Bezos comes back down, lands on Earth and thinks, right, I'm going to recreate Amazon. I'll set up a little market stall and stuff. He's going to get raided and he's going to get fucking roasted. So it doesn't fit together, just like the industrial network and ecosystem doesn't fit together. His trading mindset doesn't fit together, because it's like, how do you keep a stall without an army? Why doesn't the army take your shit? Once you see it, you see that these guys might make it through. Maybe they will be, Noah or something. But Noah's kids are going to be very fucking different. They're going to be completely different animals. Otherwise, they won't survive.
In centuries past, merchants were the most vile segment of society. And it's kind of weird today, but that's what they were.
All of it's done by merchants. Yeah, all of it's done by merchants. People don't see it. Historians don't see it much. But everything starts with commerce. All the sea voyages, all the colonialism, everything, it's trade. They're all traders. And so the Phoenicians are, right? They're the very first guys to start going all over the world. What they're doing is arbitrage. They're going to the tin mines in Spain and the UK to kick off the Bronze Age. So, without bronze, you can't get anywhere because the metals are too soft. But as soon as they strike, figure out adding tin to copper, then they're in the Bronze Age. The problem is the tin mines are only in like Cornwall, up in Iberia, so that you need if you made that trip overland with a lump of metal, you wouldn't. I mean, just imagine hauling that on a mule or on your back or something, like a kilogram of metal. Need sea travel, and so the Phoenicians were pretty good sea travelers, so they could pull it off. But they're doing arbitrage, right? They're getting tin, and then they go to some place with copper. Then both of those are not so valuable, but put them together, suddenly, a huge amount of value. And also the value of copper is you can break people's heads with it. But without the violence and without the arbitrage and without the trade, you can't do anything. So it's saying, like, after the flipping, none of that. What are you going to be fucking trading? The things will be durable. It's like the Piraha. The Piraha are not big traders because they don't have fridges, right? They don't have storehouses. You can't, in the Amazon, you can't like get the fish that you stored today, stick it in the deep freeze and take it down river to trade, right? Well, you can now. That's what's fucking them up. But if, before the white man gave them a fridge, everything perishes after a day. So actually, our whole society could be saved if you just got rid of refrigeration. If you made everybody just, give us our daily bread. If you made everything daily bread. So in other words, if you made all money last for one day and then it was worthless the next day. That would actually save our society. But what they do is they do that in effect, right? But the lifespan of a dollar is much longer. In the US, the life dollar is probably a year. In the UK, the lifespan of a pound is probably 5 years. And what that means is, you know, okay, the whole economic system is just fake, right? They just pump a whole lot of tokens into the system through the banks. They give it out as debt, and they don't give the interest, which means they keep you running around. That's the trick, is they keep you running around trying to serve the debt, and which they cleverly don't give you. They give you enough money for capital, but for the debt, they don't give you enough money. They don't put enough money into the system to allow you to repay the debt, so they don't have the interest payments are not put into the system, and that's why they keep on stealing and growing. That's the growth factor. And so when they take it out through inflation, and they take it out through taxes. So you know, they put it in here in the banks give it to you as a loan, you run around burning your ass off trying to repay the interest on that loan, and in the meantime they gobble you up with tax and inflation.
Well,
and that's their big wheel. So the wheel turns at about one revolution. The velocity of a dollar is about 1 in the States now. But if you want to know what the economy is doing, have a look at the velocity of the dollar. They set the velocity of this big wheel exactly perfect for them to capitalize on, say, a 2% growth rate and an interest rate which traditionally was about 4%. So all the parasites that don't actually contribute anything and live on unearned income and have since the dawn of civilization, they've traditionally done it between 4 and 6% out of us. And that keeps the civilization growing.
Let's add to the mental model, though, because it's not just the parasites at the banking level and the rest of people. It's the investors and the people who understand the system well enough to do rental properties instead of living in the house they have a mortgage on. So you still don't have enough to pay it back yourself, but if you enslave other people to pay it back for you, then you've got the capo system, right? So and over the course of the investors, 30-year mortgage or whatever, you pay the bank double what the house was originally worth, right? So, but the investor makes profit all the way down. It's just the people at the bottom that don't get ahead.
Yeah, I forgot. There's actually 3. I forgot rent. Yeah. So that's how you keep slaves in, say, Egypt, right, where guys don't have any options because you have a floodplain in the Nile Valley, desert on either side. So at the beginning, after the Younger Drought, the Sahara was actually fertile. So civilization could only kick off when the deserts kicked in, and then you didn't have the option of opting out of civilization. That allowed slavery. So but the way you do it is you give people a little grub stake in the Nile Valley, in the fertile valley, and then you tax them. So they pay rent, and so they in effect peons, and that's how you build pyramids and get geometry started and arithmetic and stuff. Everything. Geometry starts with geo means earth, and metry is from metri as measuring. So it's earth measuring. And so what are you measuring? You're measuring the little plot that you're going to give to the guy so that he has to pay you rent. And then they start everything. They start monitoring the level of the Nile and stuff. And what they're doing there is they're deciding how much revenue they're going to get in the next year. By depending on how much the Nile floods, will be how much alluvium is actually spread, and that'll determine how much grain the peons make. The grain will determine how big an army they can have. The army determines how big they can grow, because they're growing by conquest. And so that's pretty much how civilization goes to this day. Now, America just has perfected it, and they do that with the IMF. But the guys all behind it are financiers. They're BlackRock, State Street, they became the hedge funds, because the hedge funds got into this thing where they borrowed money to then do raids. So the corporate raiders now own everything. So they, all the KKK and State Street, Vanguard, all of these hedge funds, since the 80s, they took over the entire world. So it's basically only three things: BlackRock, State Street, and Vanguard essentially own the world. And determine everything that happens. So yeah, sorry, liberals. I know that they told you in your bedtime stories that there are no conspiracies, but it's time to wake up now. Everything's a conspiracy.
Well, talking about conspiracies, we had started the conversation about discrimination, and it was on the agenda of the meeting. And you were talking about the video that somebody posted. I think it's you, Hugh, who posted the David Icke one, and then there was a comment where there was another link to a video on YouTube of David Icke being interviewed by the BBC when he was very young, and how he was ridiculed by the media. And I would just like to bring back the subject of discrimination on and see what anybody has to say about this, because it's quite important to see. He has been totally, I think that guy, even though I don't, I think he's a he's an interesting guy. He's got visions. Why would he be shut down? And he has been totally shut down, even though I just don't understand all his reptilian stuff and all that. But he has actually been, I think he's been deplatformed completely from YouTube, hasn't he, this year? I'm not too sure, because I don't know him very well.
Yeah, it's because conspiracy theories now are put in this big, kind of grad bag of heresies, and so it's we're at the point where we're trying to hold the old system together. So this is what normally happens when you hit a revolution, is the enjeu is to consolidate. Then you have a lot of these things where people trying to go back in time, trying to turn back the clock, a lot of references to history, a lot of appeal to the ages, all of this kind of thing. And you have a lot of scapegoating. So they always find heretics. And then you have a list of what heretics have. And it's kind of like anybody that's unorthodox, because you're trying to hold on to orthodoxy, you're trying to hold on to this dying system. And so anybody that's, disparages this system, anybody that's anarchic, and anybody that's heterodox suddenly becomes a real threat. Now, it turns out that the biggest conservatives are liberals. The left is ultra conservative now, because they're the house slaves trying to hold on to the plantation. So it's ironic that the people that are supporting the plantation most now are the liberals, the house slaves. And the reason is because they don't want to lose their position in the house, and they can see people are starting to burn down the plantation. So they're running around saying, don't, prosecute people that are defecting from the system, prosecute people that don't believe in the system, prosecute heterodox ideas. So it's all, look, guys, we believe in progress. We believe in humanitarian ideals. It's like save the Enlightenment. It's Steven Pinker. Save the Enlightenment. It's the house slave saying, save the plantation, save the plantation. Why? Because we made out like bandits in the old days in the plantation. But you see, so David Icke and us as the Extinctionati, and anything that the Extinctionati does will be put in this camp. We'll be driven towards the right, because the house slaves have said, anybody on the right is a conspiracy theorist. So therefore, anything to do with conspiracy, no matter what, whether it's to do with the pandemic, whether it's to do with JFK, is immediately ridiculed, sidelined, cancelled, deplatformed, because they need orthodoxy, and they need the one thing the left always wants is consensus and uniformity. So there's this huge lamenting all the time that, oh, there's division, oh, woe is me, there's division and stuff. And so like increasingly the number of people that just want to burn the shit down is growing, and they can't do anything about that except kind of persecute them. And when they persecute them, they accelerate the process. So it's what I'm trying to say to people. Don't worry about this authoritarian and the pandemic. It's great. This system needs to be burnt down. The more, so like if they ban you from restaurants for being anti-vax or something, it's like, what, not anti-vax, authoritarian. But the more authoritarian they get, the more that you make a second-class citizen, the more that you make radical people that are self-agreed, the more, see, there's this infantile idea that you can just shut somebody up, particularly on the left. They think, shut you up. It's this kind of patronizing Karen, mommy thing, where you have this kind of school mom thing. And because the left is all infantile, then they think in terms of like school kids. And so they think like, teacher can shut you down, put you in the corner. And so they think that they can do this to a whole class of people. And they think that when people are deplatformed, they just go, oh, I'm so distraught that I've been ostracized and put on the fringe. I want to be back with all you wonderful white, house slaves. And it's like, no, they don't. They're fucking angry. So everything they're doing is shoring up a backlash. I mean, just look at the woke. Just look at the stuff they're doing, like critical race theory, teaching it to kids in school. And then, oh, you're going to shut down the Nazis. Because one thing about Nazis is as soon as you cancel and deplatform them, they go and sit in the corner and they're very contrite. Do they do that? Or do they come back and slaughter your fucking little sheep's neck? Of course they come back. And there's a backlash, and you see it now. You're going to see it in 2022. You're going to see Trump elected in 2024. They're going to re-elect a fucking dictator, and that's the way your freedom goes. It's by shutting down other people's freedom. But it's good. It's good for us because it radicalizes people. Look at the progress over this pandemic. People went from like completely complacent, thinking, talking about 2100 and climate change is about the children and how all this horseshit has all been swept away now. Now everybody's like, oh, the system is fragile. This shit does happen. Yeah, just like we told you, idiots, and it's going to get a lot worse.
Can we just go back a little bit to discrimination? Because when I first suggested that to you, I used the word discernment. Although if you go and look, they're usually, they're closely connected terms. What I was trying to get to was, for instance, if you come across David Icke for the first time, and you can read through his stuff, and you could imagine some people being not having very much background and not quite sure which way to take it, or whether this is all just complete nonsense, or whether there's something in here worth listening to or not. But it occurred to me that sometimes when you're trying to navigate peculiar messages like that, that you do have to rely on something within yourself that doesn't have all the facts available and all the knowledge and background to enable you to make these so-called informed decisions. That you're relying on something else, that you're relying on a kind of an intuition or a sense of smell or something about whether this is entirely rubbish or whether it's actually trying to say something and it's just doing it in a peculiar way. I guess what I'm trying to say is that some people seem to be missing that faculty. They don't seem to be able to be, how can I put it, non-academically critical. You see, we're always expected to keep our mouths shut unless we can be academically critical, unless we can cite all the references and the previous publications and essays that have been written on this subject. And if you can't do that, you're supposed to just shut up and you're supposedly not able to make up your own mind and think for yourself. But I think people can still make up their minds and navigate this. And I guess that was the point I was making, that they have, not everybody, but I think some people have just what I called a sense of discernment, that they could navigate without getting themselves completely misled, in the absence of having all of the necessary background information available, because you don't always have that anyway. It was more the angle I was taking on it, but I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
So my interpretation of David Icke, what he's doing is art. So he's representing the four other layers and cutting across the alien cortex. So the alien cortex has control in our world. It thinks it does. It's deluding itself. But the reason why you have to keep everything intellectual and evidence-based and scientific is because it's a tyranny of the alien cortex. Artists and shamans, renegades, confront the alien cortex with its own inconsistencies and incompleteness. So that's what Icke is doing. He's speaking from the four other layers. So what he does is art. And so that's the way the four other layers talk to the alien cortex. It's their language. So David Icke had a psychotic break. At the time of Wogan, he was psychotic. And so he was roundly disparaged. But you see, that psychosis was a kind of eupsychosis. It is the breaking of his rational faculty. So in other words, he broke through rationality. Of course, he got laughed at straight away because we're hyper rational in our culture. So, but what he's doing is a kind of a Jackson Pollock. So he presents all of this stuff. It's all weird shit. It's kind of surreal content of his four other brain layers. So it looks like Dali. It looks like a surrealist painting that he's painting in words. It appeals to people because there's other brain layers are screaming that there's something wrong, there's something fishy in the state of Denmark. So it does, where the wires cross is you mentioned the phrase making up your mind, and that is exactly what we're doing. We're making up the emperor's new mind. And so the forebrain are integrating with the alien cortex. That's what happens on the other side of eupsychosis. Why it's so traumatic is because the alien cortex doesn't want to cede control. So if you see, okay, again, sorry to go back to South Africa, but de Klerk died recently. The big thing about de Klerk was he represents the alien cortex. The Afrikaners, as weird as they were, represented, in this analogy anyway, the alien cortex in South Africa. And so de Klerk, why de Klerk is great, possibly greater than Mandela, is because he ceded power. He ceded control and power. And so that's what the alien cortex needs to do to pass through. So South Africa's experience and liberation in South Africa was very much a kind of metaphor, the psychological transformation that Icke went through, and every shaman goes through eupsychosis. So South Africa went through a psychosis. The reason why it didn't tip over to destruction is because of Mandela and de Klerk, but particularly de Klerk, because he played the role alien cortex that gave up. But here's the thing: he didn't give up out of weakness. He gave up in control. So when he gave up and ceded, he did it as a rational and avoided suicide of the country. So that's what these people are doing. See, Icke has a real problem after he goes through his eupsychosis and becomes just terribly vilified in Britain. He has to reassemble everything and then start to reinterpret the contents of his new brain. His new brain now has the four other layers in ascendancy, and the alien cortex is now the servant in the McGilchrist kind of way. So the master, everybody's master, is the alien cortex in our culture, and in Icke it's subordinated. And that is how it gets integrated. So Icke represents a new mindset, and a new making up of the mind. And McGilchrist is also hinting. McGilchrist doesn't understand, as far as I can see, about transformation and the eupsychosis and the value of it. I was very disappointed to see that thing about where McGilchrist responded to a defense of psychiatry and that, and you can clearly see that I get the impression that McGilchrist has gone psychotic and hasn't integrated it properly. He still has loyalties to the alien cortex. The alien cortex is not subordinated in him. So he's kind of like a half-poor. He's kind of like a failed transformation.
Well, I mean, he's
still in,
but he's deeply
he's still half-baked.
He's deeply embedded in academia and a lot of conventional.
That's the problem.
I mean, it's because his whole.
So in other words, he can't give up the room. Right?
I mean, he's a little bit like.
He can't get out the pot. He's still in the crucible, right? He can't finish off.
But I mean, he's a little bit like people in physics and science who observe strange behavior in subatomic particles, and they can't see that they're how it sounds corny. I mean, they can't see that it's demonstrating some fundamental spiritual things to them. They want to lapse back into a scientific interpretation.
There's a lot of things. Well, let me talk about this. There's a lot. The thing about discrimination and discernment is, it's always pointed at in the esoteric traditions as discrimination between the real and the unreal. So what McGilchrist and people are doing is they're going back to the unreal. So he keeps on going back to academia. He can't leave it alone. See, if you look at Jung, he also went through a psychotic break, which he couldn't, as a famous psychiatrist, he couldn't go and tell all his buddies that psychosis is actually a good thing. The thing that you fear most is actually a good thing. You can't tell that to psychiatrists. They'll think you're mad. So they petrified of psychosis, but they've usurped the positions of shamans in our society. So they're supposed to usher you through the delusion to the real. And so discrimination, if it's in the Bhagavad Gita, all of these great writings and that, they say it's discriminating the real from the unreal. So to get straight to the spirituality of it is like what's real and what's unreal. Now, if you're still stuck in the alien cortex, you're talking this kind of pidgin, this kind of kitchen version of language. You have a vocabulary of the guys in the prison yard. So then what's real is, well, facts are real. Stuff David Icke says is not real, and doing all of that. And so, but that's not what they're saying. They're saying that you can sweep it all aside, go to first principles, and say it's all unreal. Only one thing that's real, and that's the self with a capital S. So it's kind of like Descartes. You don't want to be a dualist, but if you're a Descartes was a dualist. He thought you had a soul and stuff, but it's like there's nothing like that. But if you say from the point of view of best that the sages could come up with in India and all around the world, and the Aryans and all of those guys, they said the only thing real is the observer. We keep on rediscovering that. We read about that in quantum physics and stuff is again and again. Copenhagen interpretation, all of these things, they come back to this ancient thing. That's why they wrote the dancing Woolly masters and stuff. Who wrote that? Wheeler or somebody. But all of those guys eventually come back to esoteric Hinduism and stuff like that, because they're saying what is real? It's like only the observation, the measurement. Think about it, your own life. All you know, you could be having a dream. You could be in a simulator. You could be in a computer program. You could be in the metaverse. This could be entirely constructed. And it is. It is. It's constructed by prima mater, by the thing. You're literally observing an illusion. Right? I'm an You're listening to me here. It's all bits and bytes. It's basically pixels on a screen. It's a crafty, conjured illusion. So you say, well, what is real? You say, all of it's unreal. It's here today, gone tomorrow. So the only thing that is real is the self, the observer. So are there more than one self? Are there lots of observers? No, there can't be. So that's the hard truth at the core of all of this. And so what they're saying, the guru, the shaman, the rebirth that they're talking about is a rebirth from the unreal to the real. And the real is that the observer exists and you're it. So it's a conundrum. You say, like, well, are there 7.8 billion observers? Nah. There might be 7.8 billion perspectives, but there's only one observer. So yeah.
I'm just wondering. I'm just caught on a crossroads here to go deeper into this. One thing that Krishnamurti asserted very assertively, was that the observer and the observed were not were one thing. That there was no separate observers. There's no separation. It's the same thing. I can appreciate that he probably is meaning that in a different sense to what you've just been saying now.
No, not at all. I mean it in exactly his sense. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I just wanted.
I think you see, we fundamentally have science has taken us down a false path. You see, so. And that the reason science is unraveling. We're at the end of science now. I've said a number of times the James Webb Telescope. When that goes up, we'll get our last look at deep space. We'll get our last time to question the universe in this way. Hunter-gatherers and our future selves, back to monkey. We're not going to look at the sky in the same way. We're not going to look at the very big and the very small in the same way. So we get a fantastic opportunity now to have our last glimpse and ask our last questions. I'll tell you right now, they're going to be unresolved because there's an infinite horizon. We'll just get to look at the horizon just before we fall off the ladder and fall back. We get a look over the wall into this vista that just goes on forever. So I have a great hopes for James because, like Apollo 8, we don't get to look at the heavens. We get to look at ourselves. We get to look at what we're doing in science. And it is a fundamental mistake that physics, particularly Einstein, is guilty of this. And Newton, they all contributed to it, but to leading us up the garden path. It's the alien cortex trying to substitute the unreal for the real. And they did a good job, though it's coming unstuck now at the end of science. They started, the lie is being revealed. And so what the lie is it's hard to describe in words, but you can see it in quantum physics and stuff. And it's the best way I can quickly get there so everybody could understand is, if you look at the point of view of light, let's just pretend that the prima mater, everything is just energy. And like light is a great form of energy because most of the shit we see about like apart from Cherenkov radiation and stuff is electromagnetic. You say it's all about electromagnetism. Maybe there aren't any quarks. Maybe it's just, folded up bits of electromagnetism. It's basically you have a big field and you have a little knot, and that's what the particle is. It's a kind of self-acting. It's kind of like a toroid or something like that. Maybe that's what the electron is.
Like
but
a tapestry.
Is we have this illusion that or just a tapestry, but more than a tapestry because it's fractal. It's you can drill down on it. It's not flat. It's a three-dimensional topology. See what there are only 3 dimensions, right? We made a big mistake with going to 11 dimensions. It's kind of an indication of our misunderstanding. But if you go down to what it is for light, is you can see it. You can see it in like a Bell inequality, and you put a split mirror and look at all this kind of quantum reality, the double split experiment and stuff. What it's saying is that there is no locality for light. So we set up a double slit experiment, and we say like, oh, you see, over here it does this, and you interrogate here, it does that, and then you get spooky accent at a distance and stuff, and you say like, no, they know that it's like non-locality. For light doesn't see it your way; it sees everything compressed with Lorentz compression, so that it's the same place. Light says you're hundreds of kilometers over here where the laser hits is exactly the same as B, where you send the other beam off from this beam splitter into B. To light, A and B are in exactly the same place, and we say, but they're hundreds of miles different. And you say, yeah, that's the illusion. The illusion of the space between A and B. It's a kind of weird thing that we as kind of 7-foot entities of this scale, we're in this illusion. But light doesn't have it. Light doesn't say that the universe is 14.7 billion. It says, no, we're still in the Big Bang.
Hugh,
it says that over and over. If you go down a black hole, they're not separate. Everybody thinks, oh, there's a black hole at the center of each one of these galaxies. They say, no, it's the same black hole. If you go into it, you reach a singularity, and the singularity, by definition, has no dimensions and it has no properties. So it's like they're all the same. They're all the same singularity. And you say, yeah, but then you have all of them are the same singularity, all at the middle of each one of these galaxies. Yeah, except the universe, the expanding universe, the Hubble universe, also that singularity. So if you can imagine this, you go sinking down a black hole. When you get to the singularity at the center of the black hole, you emerge on the edge of glory, and the kind of edge where there's no edge, right? It's not a balloon expanding. We are in the singularity in this space. So
the universe
emerge as heat on the observable universe.
Yeah, the universe doesn't recognize displacement, which is what our language does.
Well, light itself is we don't see light as it is. We see light as a displacement. So we see basically, and it displaces at the permittivity and permeability limit of free space. But you can see there's something we're doing fundamentally wrong. And so the way to do it is say, why is the permittivity of free space what it is? The exact values it takes, and permeability is like, why is it impossible to have an electric field without having a corresponding transverse magnetic field? And so like, we're kind of doing what the Hindus said with the alphabet, the Sanskrit alphabet. It's like, we're splitting. We are saying, if you do electrical impulse thing, you must get a transverse magnetic impulse, and it's a kind of, it all sums to zero. It's all in Maxwell equations and stuff, and we just can't see it. We're still trapped in this delusion that there is actually some space between point A and point B. So, well, there is time, but time comes about because kind of trying to resolve A and B is kind of like let's pretend this distance is different from this distance, and that's the game we're playing, and that's the illusion.
Hugh, can I just suggest something that it's a little bit like this? Where you can determine the position of a particle and not its velocity, or the velocity and not the position. So as soon as you try to particularize, something gets lost, and you can't do the two. And I'm wondering whether, just to go back to what you said earlier about only the self is real, and the only thing that's real is the observer. But observation is an experience, and I just looking, because we brought up time and space. So if the observer will necessarily have an experience, but an experience requires time and space in which to exist. If there wasn't time and space, it wouldn't be there. In other words, if we're going to experience something, we must be in time and space in order to do it, and that enables us to be the observer. And if so there wasn't time and space, there would be no observer. We would sort of collapse back into well, I don't know what, singularity. I don't know. I think this is the sort of conundrum of the universe, or the conundrum of God. If God wants to experience something or himself, he has to create a limitation in a way, or divide off somehow. And the sort of price you pay for being limited to time and space is that suddenly you can have an experience. Whereas if you're not caught in that, if you're not limited to that, that's fine, but you're not going to be particular enough to have an experience or be an observer. You're just part of the entire, whatever you want to call it, this great matrix of fractality. So I mean, and I think the Hindu thing does go into that. I guess in a way, the idea of
yeah, it does. It does, but they went into it in a way that's made sense of sages in the forest and talking to an audience. But for the physics point of view, it takes time. You say observation takes time, and so it's why we kind of at the edge of physics is because an observation is really a collapse of the wave packet. So basically, Schrodinger's psi, the wave equation. So when the wave equation collapses, that's an observation. Now, where we're at the limit of science is that I think in the Copenhagen interpretation and Niels Bohr's, they said, well, the collapse has to happen instantly without time. Again, it's that kind of thing we were talking about before with the square wave that's impossible. And the continuous universe, it's kind of, the universe is not discrete and it's not continuous either. We keep on flip-flopping between the two, just like poor old what's his name, who went mad trying to with the continuum hypothesis, trying to prove it. You can prove it one way or another. We kind of get stuck in a Cantor, yeah. So Cantor drove himself mad doing exactly the way physicists are driving themselves mad now, is saying the collapse of the wave packet is instantaneous. Well, it can't be. It appears to be a jump, but why? It's like maybe you could slow it down and see the continuous mechanics of the wave function. And they say no, because if you did that, it would mean the hidden variables. It would mean there were things that you could work with where you could describe the collapse of the wave packet in slow motion. And you say, no, you've got two pictures. It's like this, and then observation, collapse, or collapse, and then that amounts to an observation. And you say, there's only those pictures. They jump, and like Fermi exclusion principle is like, say, like that quantum leap is all. He says there's nothing in between A and B. And you say, like, bullshit. That's what's getting us wrong. Is that from state 1 to state 2, there's a transition, but we think of transitions as either continuous, so in other words, it's phase sense, or otherwise the Copenhagen interpretation, which is like a step, and you're not allowed intermediates. So, like, come on, dudes, both of those are wrong. They got,
yeah.
And we're stuck on that fork there, but somewhere in there is the observation of what's really going on in terms of the entire universe. Everything in the universe, everything, photon that you can see and everything, you might as well assume is a collapse of the wave packet. And then, then you confuse yourself even more thinking, well, how do you get, basically these things getting superpositions and being and things like that. And you say it's all more of an expression of our ignorance, that that it fundamentally the discrete and the continuous are both incorrect, and that's what we can't get our head around. Because and the reason why we can't get our head around it is because we are discrete. The alien cortex is discrete. It is, neurons fire. We are fundamentally, it's like discrete cannot understand continuous, and continuous can't understand discrete. And so it's like we're fucked. But go ahead, Ryan.
Yeah. So a few things to say. One is I put in chat that you won't learn this in school, but there is only one Maxwell's equation. You said Maxwell's equations. They don't teach this in school, but yeah, it's delta or gradient of f equals j over c epsilon sub 0. So that's way more concise, and it's because we use the wrong path in mathematics to get linear algebra from Clifford algebra. They're like bifurcating two different paths in mathematics, and one became dominant in academia, and that one fails to speak to nature in the same way. So it's this is the truth here, and our four Maxwell's equations is an artifact of our poor mathematics. The second is in terms of the mathematics, the neither smooth nor like this is the difficulty we're having with the unification of general relativity and quantum is that discrete versus continuous type of dynamic, and where if you have integer dimension, then you have like a smooth you can have a smooth system, but fractal dimension is often like a non-integer dimension. So like like square root of 2 dimension, something like that, where it's not like an example there is like the Sierpinski's triangle. It's more than a line and less than the plane, right? And in those cases, you end up sometimes with fractals that have smooth regions and also chaotic regions where you get things like these that quantum things popping in and out of existence, like just right next to each other. And I think that we do the math on the constraints of the universe to get things like the Planck length and things like that, but where I think we're not really thinking well about it is that just by saying we know what the smallest thing in the universe has to be, and it can't be any smaller than that, it doesn't tiled in a grid, right? That's alien cortex thinking.
Yeah, I agree. No, I entirely agree. So yeah, that's why I keep on coming back to the fractal universe, because I think the collapse of the wave packet they're missing. I mean, Feynman said, integrals over all paths and stuff like that. And so if you do an integral over all paths, you just hold that thought in mind, then you can see that the transition of the wave packet, the collapse of the wave packet must be fractal, because you must be able to interrupt it at some point in the transition. And you'd say, well, then it would be 2 discrete steps. And you say, no, it's still fractal. It's still, you could still then, it's like Zeno's paradox. You could keep on splitting the transition, and you would still see that, all the sums work out. They still come to, a unit Planck length. But the Planck length could be split, I think. And so and infinitely, you could just carry on doing it. But I must say, Ryan, I'm really indebted to you for that. The single equation for Maxwell's equation. Maxwell, just for everybody who doesn't know what Maxwell's equations are, Maxwell was the genius that you mistakenly think Einstein is. Einstein's a dullard, and Maxwell was a genius. But because of the times, the political times and the First World War and the zeitgeist of the time, we remember Einstein and forget James Clerk Maxwell, which is, he's far more of a genius than Einstein. But But so just going through the equation that you put up there, Rand. So what let's just see so what this is delta F. So the force, right? The change in force is equal to joules over the speed of light.
It's a gradient of F. So it's the
oh, okay.
Like, it's a field rather than a change.
The slope of F.
No, it's not a slope.
Okay, so the slope of F.
Yeah.
Wait, say that again?
So think of it like a vector field. So gradient is like where it's pointing at all points in F. Like, whereas delta F would be the slope of F if F was a line, right? But the gradient of F is like a weather map with where the wind is blowing, like the little arrows.
Yeah. In the field.
Yeah.
Okay. So at any point, the vector field is joules divided by the speed of light and the permittivity of free space.
I think J is charge and current rather than joules.
It's not joules?
No, it's not.
Oh.
It's a
okay. So charge and current.
Yeah.
J
is a vector.
The speed of light epsilon 0.
Yeah. There's speed of light in there, I think. J is a vector in spacetime representing the charge and current. F is a bivector. A bivector is kind of like a parallelogram in space rather than just an arrow in space. And it represents the magnetic field, electromagnetic field. So it's the relationship between charge and current and the electromagnetic field.
But so Maxwell didn't know about bivectors, right?
No.
That's why he probably didn't do this. Is that right?
No, he didn't do this. This was David Heston in the 1970s.
No, I'm saying Maxwell didn't know about bivectors, so that's why he didn't do this, right?
He I don't think he knew about bivectors. Right? He may have known about it, but didn't put it in that formalism. But it's a recent development. Basically, all of physics can be represented in this geometric algebra. There's a book called Space-Time Algebra that David Hestonus wrote that does all of calculus, all of general relativity in geometric algebra, and everything simplifies out. At the very fundamental layers, you have basic things in quantum physics also draw just from the identities in geometric algebra. Like I think the poly matrices or something is just from a basic identity in this. And one of the early identities is using complex numbers where the fractals come through, right? So if there's like Mandelbrot sets.
Which was that?
So it essentially the
which I tend to.
So the identities in terms of there's the unit bivectors. So there's like, if you think of in terms of the unit vectors in Cartesian coordinates, you'd have like an arrow for x, y, and z, and then the unit bivectors are like the planes for x, y, z, zx, and y, z, right? Those are the bivectors. The unit bivectors, when you do the geometric product or the wedge product on them, they have anti-commutativity. So like this times that equals -1, or this times itself equals -1. So that's I right there. That's the imaginary numbers, and that's really fundamental to rotations and everything. So this math is also computationally more efficient than our regular math, because you can do any rotation by doing two different flippenings, two different flips in across a plane, and it's more efficient than we do things in computers today.
So if Maxwell had seen this, it would have been obvious to him, right? He would have he would have said, "Yeah, I mean, that's what I was trying to say," right? Wouldn't he?
I don't know. I think he definitely would. I mean, if he saw this, he would probably, shit himself from how excited, and he probably wouldn't come down for a week, or he'd be kicking himself that he didn't see it earlier. But yeah, this is probably one of the most.
That's what I'm trying to get to. Is yeah, it's mind blowing. But you see that's what I'm trying to get to in a way. Is so just in case people don't know, is that physicists are all liars, by the way, and mathematicians are too. They always intuit this grand vision, and then they work out, basically they formalize it with mathematics or something like that, and then present it and hide all the scaffolding. So all their work and the insight that got them there, they hide it and pretend that they did all the crap, calculations that they put down on the final paper. They pretend that was how they got to it, where everybody knows that was a fucking lie. It's just a kind of explanation of the insight that they had. And so what's interesting is, back in Maxwell's day in the 19th century, they didn't hide it all that much. They didn't hide their workings and their kind of thought process, which now Maxwell would be roundly ridiculed for. But he published exactly what his thinking was. And he said, okay, take the shit that we know. We've got Coulomb's force, and we know there are probably these little spinners going on. So he said, imagine a free space is all these little tops spinning like this, and he worked it all out like that, which is exactly what physicists do, but pretend they don't now. And so, but he left it all of this amazing kind of very physical model, kind of Rube Goldberg thing, that eventually it all comes together in his 4 equations. But just absolutely remarkable. Just in case you're not in awe of Maxwell, Maxwell basically worked out that the electric force and the magnetic force were essentially the same thing. So he unified them. And like with a paper and pencil, just using kind of a lab bench that is in your high school, he figured out basically how fast electromagnetic wave would move, and then it just so turned out that it was close to what they had just measured, the speed of light. So he said, well, light must be an electromagnetic wave. So the little thing that makes a compass needle move, dink, 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 like that, and the mysterious force that Faraday was demonstrating at the Royal Institute, which we now think of as the electric force, he just unified them one day and then said, and by the way, that means that light is an electromagnetic wave. And people say, what, light reacts to magnets? What the fuck are you talking about? He said, oh yeah, but just in case that's not enough, that also must imply that there's a whole electromagnetic spectrum, and there must be radio waves too. So with a pencil and paper, Maxwell worked out, he unified electromagnetism, figured out that electromagnetic, and said and invented radio, almost like in an afternoon. And he said, I'll give you a pencil and paper and say, see how far you get down that road. It would have taken Einstein 1 million years to come up with half of that, but we don't remember that. And then this thing, but then he came up with 4 fundamental equations, the Maxwell's famous equations. But I always had the impression that you must be able to unify them.
I think he started with
until Rand gave me this, I never knew.
I think Maxwell's original equations were like 10 of them, and then later on, like in physics textbooks, they were able to simplify to 4. But yeah, it actually simplifies down to something, that I put in chat, right? Like 3 different terms and a constant. It's hyper elegant, and
but I think that it's there's so much left to discover in it. I think if various people have said that the particle universe was a mistake. The standard model is bullshit and doesn't really hold together, even though that's celebrated so much. It's kind of overhyped. And I think a lot of people, Lord Kelvin, and others, De Broglie and all these guys, they said that it's just one force. Energy is just really call it electromagnetism, and everything is made out of that. So the electron and the positron and the they aren't quarks. The neutron and the proton are actually just this kind of, they were going down this path of thinking them like smoke rings, kind of twists in the electromagnetic field. And it got left behind, that kind of thinking. But the various people have come back and said it's all the same thing. And I always thought, yeah, they're on the right path. They should go back and look at that stuff, as Kelvin and all those forgotten guys said. But undergraduate physicist students, they keep on coming up with these papers that say, guys, it's all the same thing. You don't need quarks and all this bullshit and now 5 fundamental forces, and so they're all the same. Gravity and all of them, they're all, and like you can, but it's not taken seriously, partly because of all these greats. All these greats stand in the way of progress. They, these guys are too iconic now to criticize. It's just it's basically we're caught in our conservatism and can't break through in physics. But anyway, it's kind of it's very moving, because I think we're at the end of physics. We're at the end. We kind of just caught a glimpse of it, just as civilization ends. And hunter-gatherers are not going to investigate things this way, use reason and stuff. And I think this will all soon be forgotten. So everything we've achieved in a remarkable century in the 20th century has to be given up, and you have to wave it goodbye. It's part of the grief of waving goodbye to civilization.
But I'm wondering whether that's maybe not quite so dire, because just to go back what you said a little while ago about Maxwell having his original insight and then rendering it in mathematics, is that, in a way he does people, that process does a disservice to people, because it removes it from the realm of communicating it to most people, because you're then transferring it into a highly specialized, privileged language that only the high priests of science can follow. And so what you've done is taken a story which could be expressed as the kind of I don't know what you might call it, as scientific mythology, which could have given people more generally an apprehension of what reality is like. But then when you want to
much worse than that.
Yeah, well, this is what I'm saying.
No, much worse than that. You see, much worse than that. You see, what is done is given rise to generations of mechanics. So what happens today in physics is they just mess with essentially the language of mathematics, and they don't have any insight anymore. So there are very few people that have Maxwell type insight. Einstein fell into this trap. Is in his later life, he just started rearranging symbols. So in other words, it kind of turns mathematics into this kind of Kabbalah, where they think there's some beauty and symmetry and stuff in the mathematics, and they forget that the mathematics is just a language to describe the universe. And they start thinking it's the wisdom is in the language itself. So they start messing with the kind of grammar. So they kind of want to get back to Shakespeare by arranging the grammar very cleverly. So I think if we just get the grammar right, and so it's in other words, it's become, that's why they get bamboozled by things like AI, because they say, well, we can just get AI, put all the symbols in there, and let the AI fuck around until the AI comes up with genius stuff just by rearranging them, and say, no, you're not going to get there that way, because that's not how the fundamental insights were got. The fundamental insights were got by a flash of intuition. of how the universe actually works,
Yeah,
which was then expressed in mathematics.
that's what I'm
So
saying. This
the
is why.
expression now they just rearranging words in effect, and then trying to get insights. It's like that's absolutely back to front. That's why physics is fucked today.
Yeah, didn't they call that like
Physics
intuitive
crashed. All the
mathematics?
science is on a crisis. Yeah, but it's mathematicians and scientists have fallen foul of this. We've been bamboozled by our own mechanism, right? So it's in a way it's the kind of thing exactly like AI. It's worship of the language instead of the ideas that we're trying to express with the language.
Yeah, it's
We've made our
worshiping
own
the map.
demon, you know.
Yeah, it's worshiping the map instead of the terrain.
Yeah, it's idolatry. It's idolatry. Is like you know, these guys, you know, made these statues to say it's kind of like, you know, Michelangelo made the David to express an insight into a perfection of humanity, and everybody starts worshipping the statue and saying like, you know, well, maybe we can make a statue exactly like it, and then be Michelangelo and say, no, it's upside down, dude, back to front. Which is what we were trying to say with the AI. It's back to front, you know. So everybody wants this theory of everything and this simple equation that, you know, but it's, again, it was like Douglas Adams pointed out. It's like, you know, if you got a theory of everything, you would have like, you know, an identity or something like E equals, you know, like Euler's identity, E to the pi I minus 1 equals 0. And it's like, fantastic, brilliant, you unified all these things. Now, what the fuck does it mean? I'll tell you what it means. It means the answer to life, the universe, and everything is 42.
Yeah.
It's like, right. What do I do with that? Exactly. Doesn't help you. If you had a theory of everything, you say, now we've conquered the universe. You just like 5 symbols describe everything. You say, oh, why? Why do they? We don't know. In essence, they've essentially done it with the fundamental constant.
I'll give some more background on what he was saying about how physicists are somehow lying. As you get into higher level mathematics, like differential equations and stuff, most of the physics formulas are differential equations. Like F equals ma is a differential equation. Force equals mass times acceleration, and acceleration is a second derivative of position. So it's like a differential thing. So if you work backwards to try to predict where things are going to go from that equation, you have to integrate twice and all these things. And there's all these, you know, it's a family of solutions that you get. And the problem is that for equations like that, we can have a solution, but for complex systems, or like even for that, if you have 3 different things in space, you've now gotten a chaotic behavior and you can't predict it. And most of our the vast majority of differential equations are unsolvable analytically. We can only simulate them. We can't actually know what they would be. And so we've run into, basically all we have to do is rely on simulation, and simulation is you know, we don't gain any insight from it. We just watch it as a movie and see where it goes, but we don't know why anything happened, right?
Yeah, and that's why we're in this reducibility, because in all the sciences, and particularly the soft ones, the crap ones, they in this crisis of reproducibility, it's even pharmacological. Even these guys who coming out with, you know, the is 93% effective and stuff like that, is they're all doing this. They're all looking too closely at the elephant, and then they're looking at statistical clumping and stuff like that, and claiming that it's statistically significant when they're all just doing p-hacking. There's so much pressure on you know, the publish and perish paradigm and all these guys. So much pressure to just produce crap that over 50%, there's a great paper from 2005, that over 50% of papers published are crap, absolute crap.
Yeah.
And, 70% are unreproducible. But, but they're saying we're heading for recursive singularity, because there are more and more papers are published every day. There's more and more random bullshit published by undergraduates every day, and more money going into nothing. But the results are trickling off into nothing. And so there's this hidden crisis that no one will talk about, because all the liberals are screaming, listen to the science, listen to the experts, and all the experts are going, fuck, this is unraveling on us. We better not let the public know. Just keep on putting out these fabulous things. Scientists discover that you can live longer by having a pet. Or just keep going with that shit. You keep bamboozling them. Just for God's sake, don't let them know that the Large Hadron Collider is a load of shit, where actually nothing is reproduced, and they won't allow any of the data out, because otherwise somebody will call bullshit on them. But yeah, there's this massive crisis in science. All the scientists know it. They're all sitting in this tiny little silo going, this is all bullshit, isn't it? And they dare not even talk about it, because they've just got to the point where progressives and liberals and school kids are told that science is wonderful and is going to solve all our problems, and the behind the scenes it's all crumbling on them, and they dare not say anything, because it's like politically so damned explosive. They like just talk in whispers behind the scenes, like, why is everything going to crap on us? And what they all petrified of is they'll lose their funding. It's all become, it's like this parliament of whores, where they're all just trying to get funding, bamboozling the science. And so a large part of all the space exploration and all this stuff going on is a complete lie. NASA's been selling this lie for decades of like, we have a future in space. It's like, I'll tell you, absolutely, we do not have a future in space. But they're never going to tell you that, because the high priesthood wants their funding. So they keep on bamboozling the public about this completely batshit crazy world, which we're not going to. And in the meantime, the world where we are going is fucking getting worse and worse. We're heading off into the twilight zone. And they won't share that with the public, because basically the high priests don't want you to know that God's just been proven to be dead.
Before we get
idol has great
on the p-hacking, I really have to say something about that. So p-hacking is about essentially, it's a thing in statistics. And what is the root word of statistics? It's the state. It's mathematics of the state. And the problem is that we've imposed upon all the papers that need to be published that essentially the p-value only makes sense in like a in a Gaussian distribution, in a normal curve, in a bell curve, right?
But just tell people what p-hacking is first. Just tell people what p-hacking is.
Okay, so normally p is like it's a measure of like the confidence interval you have on whether the thing that you're testing has a greater chance of being the thing that is the cause behind the system versus it being random. Like so it's essentially you compare to
it's kind of a derivative of a derivative in a way. Yeah. It's kind of derivative of a derivative in a way, isn't it?
I mean, I don't know where I would take
in the sense that you're trying to get another measurement that can give you a confidence level of a previous measurement. So it's kind of like you're trying to get a truth machine to tell you the difference between randomness and causality, right?
Yeah, that's true. But the essentially you're trying to they just arbitrarily pick a random like standard that this is what's good, and that's like 5%. Like
6 sigma, yeah. 5 sigma or that.
Yeah, and so that would give like a confidence interval of 95% or something, right? But the problem with it is that you can manipulate that based on your statistics to be able to get publishable, or you can move it around. Essentially this kind of thing. So
so I mean Oh, so Nassim Taleb says has got a root in the nuts for this, and it's he says, like, if you asked a statistician, you know, if you have a coin flip, right? You have a coin, you go down to a corner in New York, you talk to a hustler, and you talk to a physicist, and you say, and keep on flipping this this coin, and you'd say, like, okay, you've got heads 50 times in a row. Okay, ask the physicist, what's it likely to be on the 51st throw? The physicist will say, oh, well, you know, it'll regression to the mean. Must be tails after such a long run of heads. That's, you know, but you ask the hustler, you'd say, like, nah, it's going to be heads. That's a fake coin.
Mm-hmm.
And the hustler would always be right. But that's what they're doing. They're saying, like, how heads 10 times in a row? Very, very unlikely. Therefore, I must have just proven that if you get a pet, it's good for your health.
Yeah.
So if you get enough monkeys typing on enough of these typewriters, you get some monkey will come out with like 10 heads in a row, but it's like 6 significance. You know, we all saved. It's like, no, that's just monkeys on typewriters.
Yeah, the thing that bothers me about it
go on, sorry,
is that this mathematical trick is applied universally, even if it's not the best model to fit the data. So if you can, like, do a different technique that would model the data more accurately than like a Gaussian distribution, then you can't get published, because you have to be peer reviewable by the other people. And so essentially there are many different kinds of distributions that the data could fall under, and but you still have to, like, kind of force it into this Gaussian distribution to be able to be published and be able to be peer reviewed. Because if you tried to introduce like a random forest technique or something to model your data, that would meet the data better, then depending on the journal, like the reviewers wouldn't know what you did, right? So you just have to go and use the language of everybody to you know, use the secret handshake to be able to get your career going.
But also they hide all the, you know, the baseline, so that they don't publish negative results. Everything is published based on sensation. So if you come up with some sensational result, then, you know, people run forward and say, I've just found this gem, which no one can reproduce because basically it's a snowflake. But they everybody has to produce a gem. You can't come out with something saying, I tried this experiment, didn't work. It's like, no one will publish that. So nobody has a metric to say, okay, so you found this gem on this beach. So, like, you say, okay, now I've just found that this, you know, beach full of gems. Say, no, you found one gem on a beach, and we just haven't got all the other guys who found sand. It's like all the guys who find sand on there are like, they published. And the one guy that comes out with a snowflake gets published. And then everybody runs to the, you know, gold rush, starts mining where the guy got the snowflake and come up with nothing. And then they're like, oh no, but like new gold rush over here, and run like little kids over to, you know, the new field with a promising career. So it's complete bullshit. But anyway, we're supposed to believe that, you know, trust the experts. And it's like, I don't trust the experts. I think they're children.
Yeah, that's why we haven't had many breakthroughs in physics after like 1950s or something. Like there hasn't been anything new, really.
No new drugs, nothing.
Well, the same applies to medicine. The same applies to medicine. That's what Ivan Illich was saying too. Since the 50s, they think it was 50s or 60s, they think there's great progress. There's only techniques. There's only new pharmaceutical molecules developed, but there's absolutely no progress in medicine. Absolutely none.
And not without trying. Lots of money is supported.
So still, yeah, the return on investment in R&D goes down and down every day. And Ray Kurzweil and those guys never mention that nobody's doing any R&D. Most of the things that are claimed as R&D isn't R&D. It's just software. So software is traditionally put under the R&D bracket, and they all say there's masses of research and development going on in China. And so, no, there isn't. The guys are writing fucking Pokemon apps. That's not R&D. And so but it gets chalked up in the GDP as masses of research. So, but this is terribly, terribly important, because the economists are relying on tech as a magic, magic hat where the rabbit's going to be pulled out that saves this industrial society. So they say, tons of CO2 going up, but it doesn't matter. At the rate of technological progress, we will have sorted out how to pull it all down out of the atmosphere later. It's a problem for tomorrow.
Yeah. How does that work for cancer?
Based on the declining technology. Yeah. I mean, you really get shut down fast if you're a dinosaur like me and say, hey, when I was a kid, this is what technology was supposed to do. Like flying cars, cure for cancer. We're all going to eat pills that solve food problems, all the what problems, all of this shit. We're all going to have space colonies. We're going to have a 2-day work week. What happened to all of that? You fucking frauds! But you're not allowed to say that. You got to say, look at the iPhone, and you say, well, fucking, we were supposed to have Dick Tracy watches, decades before the iPhone. It's like, come on, guys, this is a huge fraud. And
Who put up that
Futurist magazine? Like, it's ridiculous.
You put up a video here, touched on that business of the non-realization of the Jetson dream. I can't think who it was now. Do you remember what that was? Yeah. There's obviously we're at the kind of point of, the utility value of, the diminishing returns that you're just saying.
You see, this is
massive
what people
effort
are not
is
talking
revealing
about.
nothing.
But nobody's talking about this. That no one's putting money into R&D because everybody knows that science experiments don't return anything. I found this over my career, is that they were in decades past, people were more willing to actually invest in what investors derogatively call science projects. A science project means something you don't want to invest in because it's too risky and it takes too long to develop. So, but if you approach, if you do a pitch to investors and they say, it's a science project, it's their way of saying like it's cold fusion, or it's like quantum computing. It's never going to return any money this lifetimes. But you see, nobody's saying that. Nobody's saying that all these investors, they know that the science doesn't return any money. So it's all being done with government money because the public is still duped. The public is still, in the 1950s thinking science, the next frontier. And so they can still get money out of the public. But private money is not going into these things because the guys get burnt and they know bloody well that don't touch this thing. There's no scientific progress. There's no progress in medicine, and it's all overhyped bullshit. But it's like if you actually look at these robots and stuff like Elon Musk, we're going to have a general purpose robot that's going to be, Betty the housemaid or something from the Jetsons. He's lying. If you look at General Dynamics on the hardware, just the hardware, there are no advances in software. It's basically, in the 1980s, I could have done a robot exactly like they're doing in General Dynamics today. The only difference is they've got slightly denser batteries. So basically, neodymium magnets were the big difference. Apart from that, we are in the 1950s. Robbie the Robot could have been done in the same way today by General Dynamics. And everybody's getting all breathy about, look at the animatronics.
Are you talking about
animatronics in the fucking 80s?
Talking about Boston Dynamics?
Oh yeah, Boston Dynamics. Yeah, General Dynamics is the defense contractor.
Boston Dynamics. Yeah, but can I ask you something? Just insert something there, illusion, which I think came up in that video. I can't remember the name of it. There's 2 points. One is that isn't a lot of research and development now is very much won't be funded anyway unless it's kind of very goal oriented. and so it's kind of narrowed down to trying to achieve certain ends. Whereas, as you're saying a minute ago about no significant breakthroughs having been made since the middle of last century, and that you're getting back then into a time when there was more basically tinkering around. The people who were developing new things were that was coming out of a ferment where they could follow their interest, and they weren't actually being told what to do to the degree that they are now. And that also came out, I think it was in that same video, where they referred to, I think, a condition in England, going back probably, more than 100 years ago, where, there were sort of well-educated people who had gone into the clergy, then sent off into various places in the countryside. And they had a bit of money and plenty of time, and they were being looked after. And this is where they started using their intellects, come up with rather remarkable discoveries and things, because they were just being left to go on a great exploration of their own. They weren't being directed or trammeled in any way by somebody else's requirements. But we're at the opposite end of that kind of spectrum now, where everything's got to be, within a certain discipline and for a certain reason and all this kind of thing. We've left behind the genuinely free, exploratory kind of thing. And I think that's another factor
that have happened. Yeah, there are two things that have happened. One of them is that there's no more low-hanging fruit. So you can't have all individual scientists at the point in giving people tenure, and they don't. Nobody gets tenure to go and do their fantasy research, because there's only big science left now. Papers have more and more contributors on them now. They're in the thousands. Any groundbreaking scientific paper will have in the thousands now of contributors. And so there's that. And this happens from Reagan and from Thatcher. Thatcher was a scientist, and she did her pals in. She did her colleagues in by saying that from here on out, there has to be some application. And basically, science has to be utilitarian, and unless it's commercializable and patentable and has some economic application, we're not funding it. We're not funding blue sky research anymore. And that did science in, because now if you do a research grant proposal, you have to know results before you start. They have to be accessible. They have to be provable. Otherwise, a reviewer will shoot it down and say, like, well, nobody knows how to do N. You say, yeah, well, that's what we're doing, and this proposal is trying to figure out how to do N. And say, well, unless you can tell me exactly in detail how N is going to be done, we're not funding this. And so, so nothing that's innovative can get funded. Everything has to be a minor increment unknown. So it only moves forward almost by accidents of what you can get past in proposal. And then now there was a day when like National Semiconductor or Intel, they did actual fundamental research. It's all done by the government now. They all do it with SIBRs and stuff, small business investment research grants, and so it's all has a military aspect to it, because the government's only interested in one thing, and that's basically saving its ass. And so everything starts to look a little bit dark. It all starts to look a little bit like General Dynamics and Boston Dynamics, and it's all hypersonic missiles, and it's all like, guys, what about cancer? Well, that doesn't help the U.S. military.
Well, hypersonic missiles, that would be General Dynamics.
Yeah, exactly. But they're all, everything's a little bit dark. If you look at medicine, it looks like saying, guys, that's bioweapons research, isn't it? No. It's for people with Parkinson's disease. It's like, name 5 people with Parkinson's disease, arsehole. It's like, no, I don't know anybody with Parkinson's disease, but I've devoted my life to this. Like, oh, lies. You're doing
Hugh,
file edit, you monkey.
can we change the subject? Are you, what do you want to do? Is it getting a bit late?
We should be off. I think we've gone on quite long, but
Yeah,
all
we
right,
have.
sure,
Yeah.
launch.
I want to go back to
maybe we can do it next time.
You might be able to continue it in the next one if I just start it off, which is to do with the kind of mechanics or the dynamics of the flippening. And I was still trying to visualize this adequately in my feverish imagination. And when the Earth flips, does the axis of rotation stay the same relative to the orbital plane? That was the first question. And yeah, okay, we'll just stick with that because that's why I've got my apple here. So
well, that's yeah.
Supposing you've got the sun there somewhere, just there, supposing, and the Earth is tilted at whatever it is, 22.5 degrees. And it goes around it. The axis is always relative to some fixed point out in space. That axis, it always has the same inclination. Okay, as it goes around the sun. So you've got summer here and winter there, and then when it goes around the other side of when it goes around the other side of the sun, you've got the summer there and the winter here, kind of thing. Okay, when this flippening occurs, it seems to me as though the axis of rotation will not change its angle in relation to the orbital plane. In other words, if you're supposing the orbital plane is just horizontal here for the moment, and that's our 22.5 degrees, that will remain the same, but the apple is going to turn to some. The apple is going to turn, but the axis will stay there. If you look at that video for the wing nut, the wing nut was coming out like that. It showed it doing a complete flip, but it also showed this axis never moved in relation to say a fixed point inside the spacecraft. I'm assuming that's the same thing. Okay, now what I want to do is just challenge. Go on. You want to say something? Because I'll go on a little bit further. Go on.
Oh no, finish off.
Okay, so what I was just then, because you've got a situation where, I'll come back to that rather than confuse it. I'll just keep going. So we're here. This flippening occurs. So supposing that the polar points will be somewhere in a secret location in the Mediterranean on the one side of the planet, and on the other side of the planet it'll come out somewhere near New Zealand. So we're moving from the current North Pole and rotating maybe about 35 or 40 degrees or something like that. So the apple is going to move on the stick by about 35 degrees or something. It's going to be your new rotational axis. Now, as you were saying, the safest place to be is at the point of rotation because it's going to be calm, there's less stress on the crust, less tidal all sorts of disturbances are going to be less at the new polar location. So to put it like this, you're going to be very safe there when that happens, but then you're going to have to leave very soon afterwards because aren't you now going to be at the North Pole and it's going to start getting very cold fairly soon? So you're going to be at the safest physical point, but then it's going to start to freeze over. Can you see once the flippening has occurred and everything's settled down, that is no longer the best place to be? Does that make sense?
This is why I keep on coming back to a boat. Yes, yeah. So okay, there's lots to say on this, and maybe we should address it in the next one. But I'll say straight out is that my thinking and everything I know is that the geographic pole reversal is a 180-degree flip, and so it really inverts and comes back to exactly the same spot. And it still keeps the 23.4 degree tilt. And so the reason I say that is because if you look at the at the inertial model, basically the third axis, or the flip axis, is just, imagine tiny flywheel weights. The vast majority of the momentum is equatorial. It's going round and round on the equator as it is now. So you can't really describe, you would need a tremendous force to displace that inertial mass that's rotating around the equatorial inertial mass. So my assumption is that it flips exactly symmetrically. Now, there's a couple of things to say about this. One of them is, when you see the wing nuts in that, those are very symmetrical objects. The third axis is a tiny discrepancy on the major inertial mass that's rotating. So you're just talking about a little flutter, a little flywheel that's going to move the big thing. Now, the Earth isn't symmetrical. It's like a knobbly potato. The Greenland and stuff is a massive inertial mass, and the gravity of Earth is all wobbly. It's all, to me, it's kind of remarkable that it is spinning without more precession. It should be like, really kind of chaotic. So it's remarkable that it does stabilize like that. Now, here's the kicker. It's not a rigid object, right? So it's got fluid. The mantle is all fluid. Now, if you have a look at fluid in a container, which is, okay, let's imagine the crust is kind of like some very, very thin container, and then it's basically a big bubble of fluid. If you have a look at like Pettit was an astronaut in the International Space Station, and he showed the Dunning-Beckov effect with the liquid bottle. And then you can clearly see, how if you'd spin a bottle full of liquid, which is like kind of a good model for the Earth, it quickly rotates and forms a new orientation and then stabilizes very stably in that position. The thing is, though, it's not generally a 180-degree flip. So the other thing, although it stabilizes itself and eventually stabilizes without much precession or wobble, it's not a 180-degree flip. And the evidence for this is, okay, so you must imagine they often have this kind of a T that they show as the object that they're rotating. It's a good metaphor for a three-axis body. But the Earth isn't a symmetrical T like that. It's kind of more like a Y or something like that. The dynamics of the flip needs to be challenged. Certainly my ideas about the dynamics of the flip, I think everybody should go and do their own research and challenge them. But there's also evidence that the North Pole and stuff, if you look at the Antarctic, they have all these fossils. They're crocodiles living in the Arctic and the Antarctic and stuff like that. It goes tropical. Now, it can't be the Earth going into a hothouse state. I think it's basically they're misreading the fact that the poles have actually migrated. And then there must be an ice age pole somewhere while all these crocodiles are in the Antarctic and stuff. So it looks like from the fossil record that the poles migrate around. So Hapgood and that thought that the flip was just small, 20 degrees or something like that. And a lot of guys thought it was gradual and just went clip, clip, clip like that. It's certainly not quite like that. But it's where the pole star is at the end of this flip might not be at the southern hemisphere. And so, yeah, it definitely needs to be challenged. But this is why I say, I always come back to the boat thing, and I hope I'm not reinforcing everybody down this path, because we need a diversity of opinion on this. But I think that there's enough uncertainty that you want to be able to move. So I've always thought that you want to find the tropics again after everything's stabilized. There's also the bit of a gotcha is that when the poles migrate, there's probably more ice loss. So in other words, with the initial flip or initial mass displacement, the Antarctic, for example, doesn't play a big part in it because it's symmetrical about the axis. So a big melt in the Arctic ice doesn't really change the initial mass of the spinning Earth. But that won't be true if it's not a symmetrical flip. If the Antarctic winds up, say, at about 40 degrees latitude after the flip, then it'll be in the tropics. And then you've got a massive another melt and another flip potentially.
Yeah, you could get
So
into a kind
I
of
think that,
series, a sequence of them, where they just keep one after the other.
I think, well, I think that's what the ice cores show. So you can see in the Pleistocene, there's this very regular, which implies that it's a symmetrical inversion. But then the other periods where you see this little flurry and this little chaos, it's possible that the older and younger Trias were the bookends of two flips. So you get, a partial melt of the Laurentide ice sheet, you get Lake Agassiz, and then you get more displacement. And then, you'll have another flip. They seem to go in pairs or maybe little flurries. And so you might have to, within 100 years or maybe even less, 10 years maybe, you might have to negotiate another flip. But either way, I always come back to the same thing, is you've got to be mobile. And you won't be able to trek across continents, right? So if you say, oh, well, I'll hunker down in Fort Cheney, like I think some of the guys want to do, it's like, that's not very cool, because what are you going to do when you might have to get to, you might find, oh, well, fuck it, man, I'm now in the middle of the North Pole. You'll have to trek across the North Pole in terrible conditions while all this, precipitation and ice is falling on you. It'll be hard to live off the land, and you've got to migrate south. What happens when you hit the ocean? You might think, damn, we're going to die on the shoreline. But, so I always come back to, you've got to be mobile, because
you're
so much uncertainty in all of this. And so
you're back to a kind of Noah's Ark theme, having something that floats at the same time as, because it's like, that's what comes to mind, I think individual boats might not
this is again and again, you come back to the old stuff.
Yeah, but I don't think individual boats are I mean, I know you are like that, but is again, like you talk about mutual aid, you talk about moving other people. I think bigger ships and several people on ships would be a better option, and having that option as a land community, to have also this possibility to board a ship that would house people, animals, whatever, would be a better scenario in what we're talking about.
You'll be all right, Sophie. I was having a look. That you're, I think you are about as far from Hugh as you are from the North Pole. So when Hugh becomes the North Pole, you'll still be just as far away from the North Pole. So you'll probably be okay. There was only.
I'm not planning to be the North Pole. I'm planning to be the.
No, you'll have to leave the North Pole.
So after the flip axis.
Yeah. What I was.
Well, then hopefully the North Pole will be in Antarctica, and
it's if it does a complete flip.
Have far to go.
The other, we better wind this up. I'll just leave you with the final question, and then we'll probably better finish the meeting. But what I was kind of pondering is that what is so sacred about this angle that it always seems to be preserved? I mean, the Earth could do that, and we could have perpetual sunlight here for 6 months of the year, and then on or it could do that, and we could have no seasons, for instance. But the axis position of the axis relative to the orbital plane, it appears that that's preserved, that won't change. But I don't know if that's a wrong assumption. Somehow or another, the Earth ended up in that position. And, we're assuming that the Earth moves on the axis, not that the axis moves and the Earth comes with it, which is a bit of a thorny thing, because the axis is kind of defined by the Earth's rotation. But I just wasn't quite sure. I couldn't kind of. I couldn't quite.
Yeah. So I'm not sure that the inclination will be the same. The evidence from other planets, like which one are they? A couple that are inverted,
Uranus.
And then nobody has. Which one?
Uranus.
It's
that inverted, did it?
Venus.
Venus.
Venus or Uranus?
I said Uranus is the one that's like off the orbital plane. So that's kind of tilted weird.
Yes. So Uranus is probably So Uranus is probably flipped, right? But there's one planet that's.
I think the orbit is outside of the plane of the rest of the planets, but I don't know about its spin axis.
So one of the planets is Venus or something is rotating backwards, which seems to indicate that it flipped it. But what's the other planets it doesn't all go well from the other planets based on that the inclination will stay the same. But it's well worth researching. I haven't done any research into have the seasons changed in the
Uranus.
Go back in deep time.
Uranus is on a 98 degrees axis rotation, so it's literally turning on its side, like, you know,
like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that it gets like 3 months of daylight. It comes around, it's facing that way, gets its spring, winter, autumn. You know, you get a day. Your day is 3 months or whatever you like, 6 months long. You're getting the same effect as we now get at the North and South Pole. Although no, you're going. But then when you're in your equinoxes, you're rotating that way. So you're still getting a 24-hour rotation, but it's not bringing you a day and night anymore.
Yeah, but what's the planet that goes the wrong? It revolves the wrong way.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I don't know which one it is. I don't know if it's Venus or not.
I can't remember which one it is.
I think it's one of the inner planets. It probably is. Yeah. Anyway, look. If you want to just leave those questions for the. Sorry, Ryan. You want to?
It's Venus. Our neighboring planet Venus is an oddball in many ways. For starters, it spins in the opposite directions from most of the planets, including Earth. So that on Venus, the sun rises in the west.
Yes.
Yeah, sun rises in the west.
So we will. Yeah, so after the flip, we'll be something like Venus, and funnily enough, Venus is probably very good to study from this point of view because it had an atmosphere and probably ice caps.
Yeah.
And now it's greenhouse gas. It went through exactly what we're going through, and so I think it's worth studying. But there are only two ways that a planet could do that kind of have that kind of anomaly, and that's if it was collision or Zane-Bekov type of flip. So the collision thing never looks good. Whenever you look at the collision, it seems to me that you get asteroid belt more than you get the things coagulating. There are very good reasons why things don't coagulate very well afterwards. If you look at like Maxwell's study of the rings of Saturn, the rings of Saturn are very interesting and they move at different speeds. So it's very hard to see how they all get back together again in a nice spinning lump. So yeah, I have grave doubts about collisions being responsible for those kind of things, and I think they're crustal phenomena and stuff that don't make the collisions look very, very good. So maybe the moon was created by a collision, but like look at the moon. The moon never came back down to Earth and merged again. So it has the fact that it shows one face towards the Earth is a strong indication that they probably were the same body that split. So I'll grant you that the moon was created by a dramatic collision, but like to get a thing completely reversed in its geographical rotation is I think that's a bit close to the Velinovsky and the planets in collision, it's like complete pseudoscience. So I don't give any credence to collisions causing that.
Wouldn't it be really a fun thing to have to interview, or if anybody of us know an astrophysicist who might just come into our game and decide to talk to us about this? Wouldn't it be just fantastic to have an interview?
Excellent.
Mm.
Yeah, but you see, they're gonna shoot it down for. I mean, you've got to be prepared for them to shoot it down. There's the invented here syndrome. So they why Venus spins the wrong way. Ah, there you go.
Oh my God! Yeah, this is saying the current theory holds that Venus initially spun in the same direction as most other planets, and in a way, it still does. It simply flipped its axis 180 degrees at some point. In other words, it spins the same direction it always has, just upside down. Looking at it from a planet makes the spin seem backward.
Well, there you go. That's
friction between Venus's mantle and core could have caused the flip in the first place. So that's what the scientific science says on Venus.
But I think it's also worth looking at the ice, the terrestrial ice on Venus as well, and so, because there was water vapor on Venus, and it had a nice greenhouse atmosphere, and all the water vapor has been boiled off. So it probably had oceans, and I presume it probably had ice caps too. So if you ask why did it suddenly flip, I think it's exactly the same scenario as now. What I'm proposing in this thing that I'm writing up slowly, the manifesto for the Extinctionati, is that I'm proposing just to call it the freeze-thaw cycle, and basically that's Thor with THOR. You get the joke. But it's a violence at the end of the Thor. But I think it's possible that Venus shows pretty much what happens. We are going on Venus trajectory. Very, very scary, because Venus is a hothouse Earth scenario, and then Venus has had catastrophic warming that sterilized the planet. So Earth could be on that trajectory. Yeah. Thor's hammer, exactly.
Yep. Do you want to develop some of those things just on the next meeting, and maybe that's enough for this one?
Yeah. But I like Sophie's idea about talking to people, as long as we understand that they absolutely, this is if you want to know the treatment you're going to get, is go and have a look at the continental drift guy. I can't remember what his name is now. But the guy that came up with continental drift, my God, did they pillory? Continental drift is one of the icons of geology and geography now. But when the guy came up with it, he was absolutely pilloried. My God, were they cruel? I mean, David Icke has nothing compared to what they did to him with his Earth crust, his continental drift. And then, they were visceral, because what it was saying to them is, you know nothing idiots who've been to college and listened to a whole lot of professors who were talking out of their ass. Yeah, and but so it's like you absolutely attacking the high priesthood, and they will tear you apart.
But because Ryan explained and posted this thing on Venus, and the word flip is mentioned in that. Wouldn't it be interesting to lure a nice astrophysicist to make a parallel, an eventual parallel with what happened on start with Venus case, explain it to us, and then we could slowly move into an Earth scenario, and then we could get hammered, all right, but it would just be interesting to have the physics,
So astrophysicists will be kinder, because they don't have anything at stake. It's the geologists and geographers. Those guys have. It's the earth sciences guys that you're really impinging on their territory, and they're incredibly conservative. you know, they also know a little bit about Hapgood. So they probably know about Velinovsky and Hapgood. And the reason they know it is Velinovsky in particular is used as a prime example of pseudoscience. So when they introduced college graduates or undergraduates to the idea of pseudoscience, they use Velinovsky as an example of pseudoscience. And so the very thing that we're talking about now is they associate in their mind with pseudoscience. So they're coming in straight away. If they talk to the Extinctionati, they're coming in straight away that they're talking to a flat earther. So they'll be patronizing. They're not going to entertain it. They'll be just, how can I explain to these stupid, benighted idiots that they're full of crap? And that's what they'll come. But where I think it would be interesting is they'll surface all these, you know, bullshit arguments. Like one of them I know straight out is like they say rebound. So one of the things they say is, no, the Earth does not flip because the mass displacement because of rebound. When the Greenland ice sheet melts, according to them, you know, the mantle is being depressed and all the ice melts, it rebounds, and then the mass is exactly equal. It's like rubbish.
My point would be to start on Venus and then go to you know, then gradually go to our situation. But does anybody know an astrophysicist that you follow or that you're interested? Because I really like astrophysics, but I honestly looked at most videos on most mainstream American guys that would be impossible to get. But there might be some local. I look into my.
I'm friends with Neil deGrasse Tyson.
Oh,
I'm friends with Neil deGrasse Tyson. If you want to speak to him.
Wow. Well, listen. I mean, that is some celebrity. Because I don't know would he. Why don't you try?
I channel Carl Sagan. I channel Carl Sagan. If it helps. But you know, that's a freaking excellent idea, especially starting with Venus and tiptoeing towards it.
But do you actually need an astrophysicist? You simply need somebody who understands how this works and can just tell us if we're making some fundamental error of reasoning in looking at this. You know, they don't necessarily need to be somebody who's deeply invested in a scientific career.
Yeah, but
astrophysicists
are fun.
You know,
they have a broad kind of, you know, they're so in the universe, in space, that talking about a little flip of a planet for them could be fun. If we talk about somebody who's too grounded on Earth, it's going to turn into what Hugh is saying, you know, just dismissal.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Well, how are we going to approach this? I think we should go and look at videos and stuff and try and find the biggest celeb we can that would talk to us.
Let's find a Venus specialist and a guy who's.
Ooh, I know. You know who I would like is Hossenfeldblatt, Sabine Hoffensoffen.
Oh yeah. Yeah,
she must be running out of things to talk about. She would talk to us, surely.
Oh yeah.
She's not a big enough name to diss us, is she?
Would you try to approach her?
Would you do it, Sophie? Would you try to get hold of her?
I think you would be better.
Try and approach her. And
I don't know. I could try. But what would be the? I will send you an email and we'll see about that. We want
to talk about why Venus flipped.
Yeah.
Just say we want to talk about why Venus flipped and could Earth flip in the same way.
So there are two different hypotheses for Venus. One is where it flipped, and the other is where it slowly spun down to zero and then started spinning the other way.
Well.
Which makes no sense. Otherwise, it would still be processing.
Who's that? Is that Sabine?
I mean, what applies the braking force?
That's Sabine, German name. Is she a physicist? Is she a geographer? Is she a scientist?
She's a physicist. She's a physicist.
Okay.
Yeah. Physicists are better because physicists they happily stomp all over geographers stuff, and the geographers always say like, look at the ice core, and the geographers, they always go back to the fucking ice core because that was the best thing they ever did. But they dare I say it, the geographers are a little bit dumb. So in other words, you say they're dogmatic and dumb, they're more Vogonish, and they're very, very stuck in their ways, they're conservative. So they will tell you some shit that you have to go away, and it's kind of conversation stopper. They'll use conversation stoppers. So they'll tell you, oh, bloody blah did an ice core in Antarctica, and there's no CO2 spike then, so shut up. And you like say, they like guys with the methane hypothesis. They said, no, the methane clathrate gun is not a thing because we did an ice core in Antarctica and there's a huge CO2 spike, but no methane spike. Well, the methane turns to fucking CO2, you moron. That's the OH turns it. So obviously you get a huge spike in CO2 in the thing, exactly like you got. You found the proof of the clathrate gun hypothesis, and the headline on your paper is clathrate hypothesis debunked. It's like, you just proved it, and then you say you debunked it. But the way they work, oh man. Anyway, but it'd be good to engage them, just for the publicity, just for the entertainment value. But all right, yeah. So Sabine would be good. But if anybody comes across somebody, especially a physicist that is marginally celeb, that would be really cool. Because if you talk to anybody that's just roughly known, you could like get 10,000 views or something, and that would be really good. But good. All right, well, we better end there. I think it was kind of a long one. And then we just pause and then pick it up again in the Western one. So what did you want, Gary, in the Western one is to address? We should address this one. I wanted to
I just want
what Sophie was saying about sailing.
Yeah. No, I just wanted to say those things about the axis and the where the pole will end up, and then what, just if you want to expand on that, or if you think we just leave it for the time being, if we're going to talk to somebody else.
Yeah.
I just wanted to suggest it. That's all.
No, I would like to go into that because the actual mechanics of the flip and where it winds up afterwards, I think are very important subjects, and I hopefully people have some opinions.
Yeah, I was just intrigued because for some reason it appears that the position of the axis of rotation gets preserved, and it just seemed rather curious to me that it was for some reason seemingly a sacred thing that wasn't going to move. That the actual surface would move, but the axis of rotation would stay in the same orientation. But I don't know if that's the case or not.
We need to investigate it, because the way I think of it is that you could wind up with a different orientation, but it would have to be bought at the expense of precession. So in other words, if you got any anomalies in the spin, they would have to be accounted for in the wobble, because in general, the energy all has to be conserved. You can lose a bit of energy through heat and a few of the cataclysmic forces that, tidal forces and shit that goes on, volcanic stuff and the part of the calamity. You can lose some of the energy in heat like that, but I don't think the Earth is, since it started, is slowing down spin. So I think it's conserving all the inertia. So you shouldn't think of any losses. I don't think that would be minimal. And then you have to say, okay, if there's any say aberration in the spin afterwards, then it has to be accounted for some way. So in other words, think of this: if you got it, it did a 45-degree flip and stabilized at 45 degrees. It's like, to stop at 45 degrees, you got to say, like, what applies the braking force, and then now there's a huge inertial displacement. And then you have to say, you know, well, where's the energy of that? It looks like the energy has been massively redistributed. The only way I can think of it redistributing is in some other motion like precession. But somebody should fact check me on that one.
Yes, you've also got as well, which is what I was thinking, was if the axis does move, you've got a massive change in seasonality. You know, like at one extreme you've got no seasons, and at the other extreme you've got seasons which are like never ending, and then every gradation in between, depending on what axis of, whether your axis tilts anymore. You know, I was even thinking about things like, is the tilt of the Earth that we have now one of those remarkable cosmic coincidences like the appearance of conscious life on the Earth?
No,
You
no,
know,
I don't think so. I don't think so, because I don't think it's because of, like, if you look at Petit's water bottle that he spins in space, you can see there that it stabilizes
How do you spell that?
on a new orientation. Petit, P-I-T-T-I-T. On the ISS. So I think if you Google like Zanabekov, Petit, ISS, water bottle, he spun a few things like eggs and stuff. Oh, there's a good one. He shows the difference between figuring out in space whether you have a hard-boiled egg or an unboiled, a fresh egg.
Oh, I saw
because
that.
you see, it's all based on the liquid circulating. So a hard-boiled egg does something completely different because it's a rigid body, but Earth is a liquid body. So it resembles the water bottle. And then you can see what the water bottle does quite plainly. It doesn't flip 180 degrees, but its new orientation is very stable. It doesn't precess much. So, but it is very important about the seasons and whether we lost the season. So now, so I understand the temperature record. There were long periods in the, like, between the ice ages where there wasn't much season. Now, I think that they think that's because the whole world is kind of hot and tropical, but I don't think that makes a lot of sense. I think it's that we might have lost the seasons, and they're looking at a temperate zone or a tropical zone, and the zones don't have no seasonality, so that could account for. You see, if you look, it's very interesting because of the fauna and flora and stuff, and you have to. In all these things, you have to have all these paleo species like crocodiles. They all have to survive. And you think, like, if you look at the temperature record, you say, how does a crocodile live through this? It's like, for most of it's been the ice age. I mean, crocodiles only live in temperate stuff, right? There are no crocodiles in Norway. And so you have to say, look, take one species, take a plant species, look at ferns and look at palm trees, and say cicadas, not cicadas. Yeah, look at insects would be interesting, but also not cicadas, cyclicades. What do you call those? Cycads. Yeah, look at cycads. So cycads and stuff like these. So somehow they squeak through a tropical environment, even though the temperature record says, "Oh, this is a fucking snowball Earth" or something. You know, like. So, if you have a look at the ranges, I don't think those things have changed or evolved the temperature ranges that they can survive. So, the fossils of things like crocodiles and ferns, cycads, things like that, they will give you a good idea of what the local temperature was like if there was a fossil there. So all these things are like in Antarctica. You can find these things in Antarctica. So, but it'd be very interesting to see. I mean, I don't think crocodiles can survive seasons. They got to be kind of in
warm all the time
in a tropical environment. So, yeah. So. But all of those things are good to figure out whether the tropics, the category, yeah, catalytic, yeah, that's it. The catalytic pole shift hypothesis is what this is normally called.
Cataclysmic.
Cataclysmic pole shift. Yeah, so it's I'm writing it all up in the manifesto, but it's really Hapgood and Einstein. They did most of this but Hapgood got stuck on Earth crust displacement. He just thought the crust's displaced, which can't be true because the continents would disappear in the subduction zones if that was true. If the Earth flipped, if the crust moved violently, it's like, you know, they'd be swallowed up in the subductive zones of vast continents. It can't be right. But Einstein did the foreword to Hapgood's book, and eventually Einstein went, although initially he was very keen on the theory, he went, he cooled off on it because he did lots of sums, and he said that there isn't a force that could move the crust this much. He didn't know about the Desiderata effect, and he was always pretty crap at circular motion and inertia. It was not Einstein's strong point. He had a kind of blind spots there. But eventually Hapgood also came to agree with Einstein and said, yeah, there isn't a force that can actually do this massive pole shift. And so it isn't, but yeah, that's why it kind of died. It got revived in 1985 by the Soviets because they suddenly realized the force that does it is the Desiderata effect, and that's why they classified it, the information, for 10 years. But my understanding is that the US got from Endeavour, I think it was Endeavour, what it was, maybe Telstar, whatever the first communication satellite was. The Americans found out about the Desiderata effect in the 50s with the first satellite, maybe 51 or so. But they never connected it with the Earth flip. But Desiderata instantly, as soon as he saw the wingnut flip, he started using modeling clay and plasticine and modeled the Earth flip, and so instantly the Soviets classified it because they realized that's the force that Einstein and Hapgood couldn't figure out. Then from then and after the collapse of the Soviet Union, my understanding is that the US then figured it out as well, and has been prepping for it ever since.
The thing I'm confused about is how do you, if you just spin something in space and it flips, like how do you get such a long periodicity on the spinning on the main axis? Because a lot of the things that I've seen, they do like 10 or so spins and then flip, and then 10 or so spins and then flip, right? It's not like however millions of years, whatever where it's been stable.
It's all about the relative mass, the relative mass of the third axis versus the first spin axis. So if you have a huge body like the Earth and a relatively tiny little flywheel, what it's doing is accumulating an aberration, right? So it's kind of like Lorentz stability, but it's just a little bit off, and then it's like a swing. Each time it goes around, it's accumulating a tiny bit more inertia on the flip axis. So eventually it tips. Basically, it goes over a point where it's actually providing a big impetus to the flip axis. But my understanding is it accumulates very slowly until basically it becomes visible and flip, and then it appears very sudden because the actual point where it's just providing a tiny wobble to the point where it actually flips is minute. But the problem with the Desiderata effect is it's not really intuitive. In that video that the guy in Veritasium did, he said, like, they asked to find the Desiderata effect, one of his students, and the students asked, is there any way to intuitively understand the Desiderata effect? And Feynman is supposed to have like given it some thought for about 10 seconds and then said, no. You can only understand it from the math. but then the Veritasium guy went ahead and did try to give an intuitive explanation of it. And I think he did quite a good job. But the main thing to think of it like a potter's wheel. So if you've ever done pottery, if you center the clay, right, it'll stay centered quite well. But if you just have a little bit of aberration, it starts going like this, and then, so it can sit there for like 30 minutes on a potter's wheel, and then just this accumulation of this kind of wobble grows up, and then it goes and goes off the flywheel. So if you'll be familiar with that if you've ever worked with a potter's wheel. It can say amazingly fixed the clay, and then suddenly it goes shooting off in one direction. Actually, a potter's wheel might be quite a rough intuitive thing. You can imagine that on a potter's wheel, if you get the clay just slightly wrong and you speed it up too fast, you'll see it spin off suddenly. It's quite it is a rough, I think, analogy. But yeah, it's just about it. I think it accumulates like a child's swing, like a pendulum. It's like it's just a tiny little impetus. Each revolution being tiny. It's accumulating until basically it goes. Yeah. But yeah, and it's very complex because those things are all symmetrical, beautifully symmetrical, and then the Earth is not. So, and it's liquid and stuff, so it gets complicated really, really fast. So, all right, let's stop then. And that long sesh there. Sorry about that. All right, let's just fall still. Pause. Om Paramatmane Namah. Just by the way, that thing, have a look at that Ramana Maharshi video on the thing, and then so what Gary was talking about is the observer and the discrimination between the real and unreal, and the only real thing is the observer. The Hindus call that the Atman. And then what is there, like the Parama Atman is the universal observer. So anyway, that's.
Thank you very much. Thanks for
All right.
Thanks, Hugh.
Cheers then.
Thanks everyone. Bye.
All right.
Ciao.
Thanks for recording, Sophie.
Be safe
Cheers.
out there.